approve the minutes from our June 9th meeting. Did anyone have any questions or corrections on the minutes?
Before we go too far, we are still two outside.
Oh, we are. God bless you.
Excuse me, thank you.
I'll go ahead and I'll wait you down.
Okay. Okay, so we will not do our business yet until we get to, I'm shocked we're not at quorum.
Yeah.
Seems like a full house. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on our regular agenda items. So we're going to start off with a member opener like we incorporated in the last 6 or 9 months. We started doing this and super pleased to have Chris Vladimir, the Senior Director for Training and Development at Knife River, where we are, those of us that are here in person. She's going to share a little bit about her background and some more with everyone about Knife River. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
All right. Well, I feel like I've been talking a lot if you went on the tour. I just never can stop because I get so excited about this place and all the cool stuff that Knife River's doing. But so yeah, this is my first meeting with everybody in person. I wasn't able to make the first meeting after I was officially appointed, but I'm super excited to get to know everyone and to work with you all to benefit our state and our citizens. And my heart always goes out, as many of you know, to youth. That's where I'm super passionate. But a little bit of background about me. I spent 23 years in the workforce development system. The last 7 years of that 23 years, I was the CEO of the Oregon Consortium and Oregon Workforce Alliance. So I ran the Workforce Investment Board for the 23 rural counties in Oregon, got to work side by side with this gal right here, and had just an incredible experience. I have been very blessed in my life to only have careers that I've absolutely loved. Thought I would never leave them. But at some point, after 23 years of government and feeling like I was pushing boulders with my nose, I decided that it was time to follow my passion, which is to work with at-risk youth. And so I went to work for 10 years as the CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Greater Sandy Am. So multi-community Boys and Girls Club, serving about 4,000 youth a year over in Lebanon and Sweet Home. And just really dug in and did great work with kids. They're still doing great work. But about 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, my friends at Knife River, who I had been working on mostly on youth projects with, started talking to me about this center and what their goals were here. And so I was able to come out several times during the construction of the center, meet the then learning services team that was actually sequestered here because it was COVID too at that time. So they were actually running equipment, helping to build the center, and then got offered the job to come here a little over 2.5 years ago. And since that time, now my position is, originally I was the center director and focused on community engagement, grant writing, variety of different things like that, in addition to managing and lighting up the business of the center, because no one at Knife River had any idea how to do an event center or. We got that lit up. And then about 4 months ago, they decided they wanted to create a new training and development team for the corporation. And so they offered me that position to manage that at a senior level. So now my team is building out ultimately it'll be around 23. We continue to serve all 14 states of our Knife River network, but Knife River as a company as well is growing and expanding. Several large acquisitions are on the docket right now. And we expect within the next 5 years to go from our current employee base is about 6,500, where they expect to grow to 14,000. Wow. So there's going to be a lot of work and a lot of fun happening over the next few years. So I just feel super blessed to have the opportunity to be here now when this company is doing some really amazing things. Why would I be interested in construction, in a construction company? I have a lot of, that comes up a lot. I've been around the industry my whole entire life. My dad was an equipment operator, but I also am married to an individual that is in the trucking industry. We own and operate 70 flatbed specialty hauling trucks nationwide. So I have real skin in the game as far as the transportation side of things, and also the desire to help individuals connect to great careers. Not every career requires college degree at the start. There are a lot of careers like careers at Knife River where you can come in, like I was saying, down in the dome, they're gonna hand you a shovel first, but you may be an engineer in the end. The president and CEO of the company that just retired a year ago started out as a ready mix driver in Sacramento, California when he was 18 years old. And he retired a multimillionaire as president and CEO of Knife River Corporation. And it was because he came to work for a company. Well, he didn't come to work for Knife River initially. But the companies that he worked for during his career invested in him and grew him. And he went to college and he did all these things. And so being part of a company in an industry that's willing to do that is really important to me. So I made myself some notes because I could take up the next 30 minutes. So I guess I'll tell you what's going on and you don't need that from me.
You only have 50.
We've been blessed here at the center by support from the state of Oregon. And I want to give a shout out about that. We received a $4 million discretionary fund grant right after I started, well, about 8 or 9 months after I started my job here, to complete the build out of the campus as you see it now. So the 2 buildings to the west, those were funded through that. It also gave us the funding to finish out the simulated city, the underground structure and some of the overhead structure. It's amazing how fast money goes. But so that was a big boost or a huge boost to our ability to make progress rapidly here. Employment Workforce Partnership also funded a project that we did last year. We ran a construction boot camp, a 5-day program, tuition free for job seekers and underrepresented populations. And so we focused on 5 days, come in, get your first aid CPR, then your OSHA 10, and then they would learn to operate 2 pieces of equipment all in 5 days. Also get to know our culture, get to know about the industry. So that was a neat thing, and we really enjoyed the opportunity to.
Prosperity 10,000.
Yes, yes, it was. Thank you. Sorry.
A shovel and an axe?
No, they actually operated skid steer, and then I should have been more clear about that. They got their certifications for man lift and telehandler.
Okay.
So OSHA, so they left with 4 certifications.
Wow.
So
Super successful.
yeah, we put 60 people through that program. So that was a neat thing. And it was a really great opportunity for my team. Most of them have never worked with anybody outside of the industry. So we started bringing in these groups, very interesting groups, as you know, that are coming through the WorkSource system. And we also worked with Warm Springs and Grand Ronde. And so we had these really eclectic groups of very inexperienced, sometimes no idea what they were getting themselves into until they got here, individuals. So it was a real growth opportunity for my instructors, and a growth opportunity for the folks that came through the program. And I know Knife River hired 4 or 5 of them at least. So, but yeah, so that was really a neat thing. So a couple things that we didn't talk about while we were on the tour, and of course, everybody out there in Teams land, we do have a mission here, and our mission is to promote Knife River's people first culture. So Sydney and I were talking about it before everyone got here. People is our #1 value. And so we live it, we breathe it, and this place is a physical testament to that. And our team here, it's just, hopefully you feel it when you come in the door, you feel welcomed. We want you here. We want you to have a great experience while you're here, whether you're having a meeting like this or whether you're in one of our equipment classes. We want to get to know you and have you come back. Every time someone walks through the front door, I think it's an opportunity to hire someone over to Knife River. I have a lot of people follow up, hey, about this, my son, my son's just graduating high school, how can I connect him in? So we do a lot of that. But the other thing that and I was talking with Charlie about this and Anne earlier, related to our culture is we believe in the 6 C's, and the 6 C's are care, communication, consistency, challenge, commitment, and culture. So what our team members experience while they are here are parts of those 6 C's. And we're actually rolling out a new curriculum. I'll have a trainer hitting the road, going down to Texas, going to Minnesota, going to all those places and teaching the 6 C's. We already live it here. I'm a coach. You're my team member. We don't have a supervisor or employee relationship. I want to recruit you. I want to grow you. I want your skills to develop. I want you to stay. So we have the win. So we look at preseason, season, postseason approach to developing our people. What else? I don't need to talk anymore about Knife River. It's just great. Everybody should come work with us. My role is really unique in the company. Obviously, thank God there's no other Chris Latimer. I mean, they would just oh my gosh. But I am trying to take my experience. What I get really jazzed about is trying to take my experience from the past and the present and then work with my team members out in the other states. Like, are you connecting with your workforce investment board? What are you doing with the public system? Are we having similar conversations? What's the priority and focus in your area? Trying to push some of that out. Also just want to mention that last year we had over 3,000 high school students come visit us here at the center. So Knife River's just basically given me a blank check. They don't ever ask how much did that cost. We worked with over 70 high schools last year. And what we do is we plan, I target CTE STEM programs. I target juniors and seniors in high school. And we open up and say, these are the dates we're going to host a career expo at the Knife River Training Center. I put it out to the educators that are in my system on my spreadsheet, and I try to grow that all the time. But it's up to you to register. You can bring a maximum of 25 students, juniors and seniors. I really want them to be CTE STEM kids, target-rich environment. You bring two educators or 2 chaperones, 25 kids. We cap it at about 150 kids per event. And we put them through 3.5 hours of activities. So it's not me sitting across pushing a brochure or a pen to you and saying, please come to work for our company. It's going to be a great experience. I swear. It's actually getting you in a piece of heavy equipment. Like Will said, are you here for the paper course? Yeah. But we'll get them and we'll get kids in skid steers and excavators. We'll do an engineering challenge in a classroom. We talk about communication and in leadership, the importance of those 6 C's, caring, commitment, all those things. We want them to get to know our culture and talk to them about careers, whether they're interested in being out on the construction site or being in the office in HR. So I love that they let us do that. We're hosting the Skills USA Oregon competitions here now. We did it last year for the first time. I don't know why I said yes again, because it's like a nightmare. But we'll do it again because it's the right thing to do. And I have a company that's working. So that's enough about Knife River. I'm just super excited to be part of the workforce board. I will say that when I came, this is my first endeavor really in the private sector because I don't work in the trucking company. We agreed a long time ago we'd never work together. We've been married 35 years and it's just because we're working together. But when I came here, then I started trying to tap into the WorkSource system and navigate this system that has quote unquote changed so much since I was in the workforce system. And I found it not to be super user friendly from my desk. And so, my goal and the reason that I was interested in serving really was, can I help drive and navigate it? I've had the experience on both sides, so I'm happy to lend my shoulder, not my nose, So that's me.
I would add that Chris is also on the Willamette Workforce
Yes.
Partnership Board. So I think that will, to your last point, and also a great connection between the state board and a local board.
I'm super excited. Also on the OTA, the Oregon Trucking Association Workforce Development. So I love what those guys are doing down in Lane County, so Southern Oregon. That's me.
That's
Thanks, Ann.
terrific. It's amazing. I wrote down role model, passion for workforce, incredible partnerships that you've sought out on both sides of your career. And then just your commitment to growing the future workforce. And I think about like what we do at PGE, and you're out there training people, not to raise their boom into lines and stuff, like how it intersects with my world. Really incredible work, Chris. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Or how you don't want it to intersect. with
Yeah.
people.
I hope I said that correctly. Yeah. That is not a good day. All right. So with that, we are going to move into our next section, and this will be team organ builds, I build, and organ employability skills. So Jim Taylor, Tony Frazier, Sherry Clark, and Jenny Newby, and I'll let you all kind of talk a little bit about yourselves. And we do have a little bit of extra time, so we want to take a break at 2:15 and it's 1:25. So, or maybe we'll say we'll break at 2:20 just to give you all a little bit extra. I know there's a lot of really great information that you're here to present today. So, hey, Jim, are you kicking us off?
Let's find out.
Yeah.
Can I check with folks online a thumbs up or any sort of indication if you can hear me okay from where I'm seated? Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm gonna maybe start to sound a little different, read an email I just received, and if I start crying, I apologize.
Oh.
This is from one of Team Oregon Build's core leads. This morning I spoke with one of 30 families that were devastated by the very recent Copperfield fire near Chiloquin. A family, I will not name out loud, a family lost everything and are now left trying to begin the long process of rebuilding their life in the Chiloquin community. I am meeting with them tomorrow with additional fire victims and families that have survived, meeting them at their property to look at their site and troubleshoot the delivery of an 8x16 short storage shed so that they can begin to recover from the impacts of the fire. This family has requested 2 to 3 8x16 units for use in storing their lost items, or remaining items, and to store those things that they're going to work on to help rebuild their property. If it's at all possible, can any of the Team Southern Oregon Build folks meet Monday afternoon after I've gathered more info so we can figure out how to deliver these items and or have a mass community build out to respond. That is happening within days and minutes of any member of the Team Oregon Build network getting a phone call, an email, a text message, or simply knowing that somebody in their community needs help and reaching out to see how they can assist. Team Oregon Build, go ahead, if you don't mind, click into the next one. That would be me and many of the core team. Next one, please. And I'm smiling because I just caught a bunch of crab on the Columbia. Team Oregon Build, the approach that we took, I'm 28 years in the classroom educator, many of those in career technical education. Additionally, being a teacher, you need a side hustle, and that was construction since the age of 16 with family and friends, and having run businesses that work in remodeling, renovation, home building, et cetera. And having taught at the middle school level, which apparently qualifies me to run a meeting at the state level.
Yes.
That's right. Have come to this place with Oregon Housing Community Services Disaster Recovery Division. I'm the lead hammer swinger for the rebuilding of homes for wildfire survivors from 2020. 4,260 families lost their homes in 17 days in 2020. About half of those have been recovered through insurance and local and state efforts. And we have about 2,000 families to recover still. And that's the work of my team, as well as the entire division of recovery and resilience at Oregon Housing. We work closely with other agencies across the state to make this work happen. I arrived last January. I started talking to folks, and coming from CTE world and knowing the people in these regions, specifically, I think possibly the next slide might show us the 3 partners, 3 regions. If not, yeah, we'll go back one if I could, please. 3 partners, 3 regions. So Southern Oregon, Lane County, and Willamette Valley across to Lincoln County are the 3 most still remaining to be built zones from the 2020 fires. The strength of the CTE STEM and business and industry partnerships in those areas led to conversations. September 19th last year, we put 28 people in a room at Lane ESD. We did the what if game. What could we imagine could happen if we brought the promising practices and responses that are happening in 3 regions together? And if we walked into an unknown space with no funding and said, we're going to become this thing, what would happen? What if we did this? We did that. Oregon Department of Education lifted $3 million for lost learning to support the effort. We were able to provide material kits to classrooms across the state so that teachers did not have to fundraise or ask their administration for materials for their kids to work on projects. And within 2 months, we stood up 48 schools and almost 5,000 students into action, building sheds and cottages for people to have immediate place to shelter and to store goods that may have been, and this could come through houseless, homeless transition efforts or from disaster and other crisis recovery. At the end of June, we had 68 schools engaged. And so we'll just quickly highlight, we'll go back for one quick, so just kind of a brief overview. If I'm back one, the idea being that as agencies coming together, we are not going to be umbrella 50,000 foot, drop a bunch of rules, regulations, requirements, and money on you and say, get it done. We're going to come in and listen, learn to the local needs and observe and find who are the strong partners and what's happening that really needs to have that extra nourishment so they can be enriched. So we went to that agricultural model of you have an orchard, you have a work that's being done. We're going to fertilize that soil with funding and technical guidance and support. And we're going to help you grow out that program, but we ask you to be partners with people in other regions of the state. That partnership has exploded. So built upon, next slide, please. Southern Oregon with the bus project, Lane County, constructing a brighter future, responding to the McKenzie Valley fires, Holiday Farm fires, building sheds and shelters, led to a partnership with Everyone Village and other transition villages that are working on houseless efforts. This village of 75 has about 60 units built by Team Oregon Build participating schools, folks moving from street living into sheltered and supported, surrounded supports. The next slide should be, I think, bus project. Southern Oregon, which in the immediate aftermath, if you can imagine a high school, one day having full staff and full students, and 4 days later, 37% of the students have lost their homes and 48% of the teachers have lost their homes in the raging fire that moved through Jackson County. That school's answer was to transition 4 buses into tiny homes. Students and community partners gathered and they did 4 tiny home conversions to immediately get friends and family back into housing. They also are probably one of the hallmark regions in the state for a truly integrated and cohesive CTE and STEM network of partners. Really incredible work that they do and model how to bring differing funding sources together to create positive products. And our next slide should be the Willamette region, which houses 2 outstanding programs in Salem Kaiser's Career Technical Education Center and the Willamette Career Academy, where students who are not in the Salem Kaiser district, but in the more remote rural school districts around the valley are able to come together and learn in an incredible facility with amazing educators. So bring all these models together. CTE STEM Alliance, bus project, sheds and cottages being built. Again, business and industry very closely connected to the classroom, and the center concept working together in a unified approach. Next slide, please. The things that the kids do, learn through building, teach with teachers are teaching with purpose. We're partnering with industry very closely and working alongside community to ask them what their needs are and to provide responses that are truly catered to that. Next slide, please. I'm going quick so we can get to the good stuff, right? The questions and the answers. So part of the additional work that's being promoted by the Department of Education is to create curriculum packets, videos, and materials to support elementary, middle, high school, community college, and adults moving through job transition to understand better carpentry, concrete, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, roofing trades and the construction trades. But more importantly, as I also sit on a group that is of state contract managers who have funding, state and federal funding that responds to wildfires, we notice an enormous gap in the career trades that are necessary for disaster and crisis readiness, response, recovery, and resilience. So Team Oregon Build is about to start some partner and brother and sister organizations called Team Oregon Strong, Team Oregon Ready, Team Oregon Aging Well. Just sat in a meeting on Wednesday with Polk County, 40 champions and heroes who came together to talk about an elderly services summit, and everybody walked out thinking and believing that if we connect our efforts to kids in schools, we can problem solve, troubleshoot, and start to do long-term planning and resolution to some of these crises by engaging our youth in the development of their skills and their engagement with community needs. So you'll start to see those videos and curriculum roll out. Next slide, please. All the things that we deliver, much of this is going to be discussed by Tony with regard to the iBuild camp, so I'll leave that for him. Next, please. Hands, heads, and hearts, building homes. The kids are at the center of this and serving the person in the community that is most in need. Next slide, please. If you haven't seen our Team Oregon Build website, it's fantastic. Did I mention this all started September 19th of last year? Funding landed in the end of March of this year. All this was executed since that date. That's a list of the partners that are surrounding. We have a really cool animation where the hammers come together and the heart pulses in the center. Yeah, it's great. And next slide, please. This was before the close of school. So we were at 48, 6,500, 180 builds in progress. I think I put in the next slide, which was the where we're at now. Nope, if not, okay, go back. So current data, we just did professional development at Lane Community College for 75 middle school and high school teachers. We now have 110 schools in the program. In the next 2 weeks, 17,000 students will be swinging hammers to work on these projects. We landed 2 units in Eastern Oregon. We have responded. The governor put out an all call to agencies and to partners saying, what could we do to respond to Eastern Oregon? Team Oregon Build was picked first to do the first response. And we landed a cottage and a shed for a rancher who refused to accept help from anybody else until he heard there were some middle school and high school kids that wanted to help him out. And he let Team Oregon Build on his property, and he is safely in a unit that is 8 by 16, fully insulated, completely drywalled out, electrified, supported with a generator, and a shed, which was stocked by Finiston partners of Team Oregon Build with the materials he would need to capture his nearly 2,000 cattle that were running loose on his multiple thousands of acres, a ranch that was completely devastated by the fires in Eastern Oregon just in the last month. So we're very proud of the work we're doing, and we're making every effort to reach as many places and spaces so that people know of this work. Funding expires in 2 weeks and 1 day. And we are going to continue to work even without funding. That network is too strong to let go of the hands that we're holding with one another. So we're here to share that message with you and then share some additional partnerships that have led to even greater storytelling on the impacts with kids and community. So I'll pass it then, I believe, to Tony.
I'm gonna stand up because I can't see everyone. So Jim just gave us like the big high level, really cool statewide picture, and he and I usually take bets of who's gonna cry first when we start telling stories. I'm gonna get in the room. I even got a tear out of Charlie once though. But so we were one of the programs that operated under Team Oregon Build. We were able to do a summer program with Salem Kaiser Public Schools funding. And what we did, well, I'll back up a little bit. So I go to a presentation very much like this on May 14th.
Let's thank Workforce Talent Development Board for putting on
Yes.
Talent Summit, because what's a story you're about to hear happened because of a 30-minute share during a session at the WCP Talent Summit.
Yeah, so fortunately, I brought my whole program staff to this conference because we were all sitting in the same row when we heard Jim present this. We had a week and a half left to decide what we were gonna write for the SKPS funding for summer programming. We do have children's camps at the Crocs. That was an easy one. Like we could go there, but I'm like, oh, I feel like we could do some more this summer. And so we hear Jim give this presentation. During the presentation, they stop everyone and say, hey, talk amongst yourselves and see what you think about everything you just heard.
What if?
What if? Yep. And so our what if conversation with me and 3 of my staff was, we could do this as a summer program. And then we kind of built that out a little bit. Everybody got called back to order. What did anybody come up with? Nobody was really raising their hands. So I raised my hand. I said, well, we think we can serve 40 kids. This is where I started. We think we can serve 40 kids and build 10 units. And I did sleep on that overnight and realized 40 kids would be chaos. Let's do 24. So we did 24. We targeted 24 students and 12 units in 8 weeks of the summer program that started early July and ended on August 31. the partners, oh dear, I'm gonna try to do this, so you might have to help me. The partners in this effort was, of course, Team Oregon Build, Chemeketa Community College, Willamette Workforce Partnership, who with Dean's help helped us align employers to come in and visit with the kids. That worked really well. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Wise Mind, so we built in, and I really wanted to do this, a social and emotional wellness component, helping kids manage their anxiety and their emotions, really, right? Learn when they're escalating and then what to do with that escalation and how to check it and how to recalibrate. It's called mind and heart coherence. Don't tell anyone I tried to explain it. But there's some biofeedback technology that goes with it. So the students can actually see what their heart and mind coherence, their heart and brain coherence is, what's happening there. And interesting to note, they learn that the heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart.
Oh, that's
Yes, it's very interesting. So once they start to get their head around that and kind of realize how to do, there's a mechanism called heart breathing and a few different things, they can get to a point where they no longer need the biofeedback mechanism because now they understand their own physiology and what's going on when they're escalating or they're feeling anxiety or whatever. Anyway, that was one of my favorite parts of the program. We had a local business, the property owner actually contributes greatly to the location that we ended up in and were able to build in. That was a huge blessing. So after hearing Jim's presentation and standing in the hall with him, getting all excited about how this was going to work, and then I spent the next day and a half texting from the conference anyone who I thought could help figure this out. We literally had a meeting, so that was on Tuesday. We had a meeting in my office on a Friday with Chemeketa Community College, Jim, Wise Mind, Instruction Construction, who became our trainers for the summer, and I feel like I'm missing someone.
Your team.
Oh, my team, Croc. Yes, on a Friday. So that Tuesday, we hear about it. Yay, let's do it. Friday, we're having a meeting, and that meeting was, I need all the grant fodder because we got to write this thing over the weekend. Because Catherine on my staff and I, we had to get that grant out on Monday because she and I had a conference Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday the following week when the grant was due. So we got everything we needed on a Friday, worked through it on over the weekend, sent it out on Monday. Waited a week and a half, praying like mad, see if we were gonna get the funding. Got the funding, but here's the thing. Summer money is kind of tricky. It'd be nice if summer money came out way earlier than it does, right?
Yes.
Because if you're gonna launch a new program, like you have a very short window to make it happen, right? So we literally had, by the time we got the grant announcement, we literally had 2 weeks to launch, and you can't start recruiting until you know you're funded, right? We started our recruitment. We got 70 interested parties to the recruitment. 34 unique individuals showed up over a 4-day orientation period. And from that, we narrowed it down to the 24 students who became part of the iBuild summer training program. In that program, they got math and English credit recovery, a half credit, that's a semester's worth of credit. And we pushed that hard in our promotion, and a lot of young people signed up because of that. They're figuring that's going to be way more fun than sitting my butt in a seat all summer trying to make up that half credit, right? Credit recovery, math and English, 5 credits of APR 101, which plays to the Chemeketa construction credential. They got OSHA 10, CPR first aid, Wise Mind component, and Oregon employability skills. Then the grant was robust enough that we had some incentives built in also. So they got a Croc membership, of course, while they were in program. At completion of program, graduation, they got a tool belt full of tools and a 1-year membership to the Croc Center that we were able to build into that grant. And it was really fun, you guys. Croc Center plays a great community role in that with young people who need to be engaged in community. We're a great place for that, you can imagine. And so I would go to the site during the day and the kids would tell me how much fun they had swimming the night before or working out at the center, things like that, right? So they were using their membership, which I thought was really cool. So all of those things that I just said launched in a 2-week time frame, essentially. right? So then I was joking with everyone that my full-time job over the course of the summer was going to be bringing anyone of influence that I could find to the site. Now, I had lots of help with that. When I worked with partnership, Jim really worked his angles. Todd helped us quite a bit with connections and so forth. And then we had one of the executive committee meetings on the site. That was beautiful. But the goal, you guys, really is to, how do we continue funding things like this, right? Goofy guys like me who have the craziness to go out and just shake bushes until people get tired of me. We could figure things out for a little while, but it's not sustainable. Well, I think it is, but I need to have a reality check sometimes. But what we need is base funding. So here's one of the interesting conversations I had. The DHS director guy.
Ed Flick. Yep.
Ed Flick.
Ed Flick, yep.
He stopped by on his own one day. I mean, Jim invited him. And he got pretty excited about what he was seeing going on. So I was able to have a conversation with him. Like, I get the whole emergency response piece. I love that piece, right? When we talk about wildfires and homeless and just those kinds of things, for kids to be able to build the units that we need to put in communities to serve in this way, it's beautiful. I'm like, but here's the thing. If you come to me and I don't have my program stood up and you tell me you have an emergency need, it's going to take me 2 months to get a program up, right? Recruitment and all the whole thing. Well, 2 weeks, but that was, yeah. I don't know if I can do that every time. Every time. So, but what I said was, if we had some base funding where we're operating and we are building units, currently the 12 units that we built went to Church at the Park in the city of Salem. They took the first 6 and they were like, what are we gonna do with the next 6? And they're like, we'll take those 2. Yes. So those went local. So our local kids worked on local projects to serve local people. I mean, it's beautiful, right? So what I was telling Ed Flick was, if I'm doing that locally and he comes to me with an emergency need, I can pause that, fulfill that emergency need for as long as it takes, pause that and go back to what we were doing. Got to have a program up and running to be able to meet it from an emergency need standpoint, right? So we had several fun conversations like that. Todd wanted me to make sure I noted this. We now have, so coming up on the end of any funding run, you're like, oh, I wish we could keep this going, right? We have a private investor who is going to allow us to continue the program now into fall, which is very exciting. So that allows me to keep my trainers, my training staff, which if I don't have trainers, I really don't have anything. And then our building that we are currently building in. So this is where the public-private partnership can start to come into play, right? Or even nonprofit private partnership with public input as well. Like, all the pieces are here, right? The investor said, well, he called a meeting, and this has been so fun, you guys, with Salem Kaiser Public Schools, new director, new superintendent, the new guy at Willamette ESD, Joe. So Andrea at Salem Kaiser, Joe at Willamette ESD, Holly Nelson from Chemeketa Community College, myself, and the investors. And Salam Noor, some of you know him, he raised the question, if we're going to continue to invest in youth programming within our community, who should be the target group? And what else should we do? Now, we have CTEC, many of you know, Willamette Career Academy, you just saw that. And Andrea, SKPS, starts off by saying 16 to 24 out of school youth. And I was just like, that is my happy place, if you guys know me, right? And I was just like, oh, I can't believe she said that. And she said, we probably shouldn't put it in our institution because we tend to gravitate back to the things we always know. Oh, I'm like, we are on a good track right now, right? And so everybody chimed in around that. But here's the thing, that meeting was called and we just did a follow-up yesterday, which is just beautiful. I wish I could record these so you could see how well we're resonating, right? These are heads of institutions, decision makers who have been called together to go, hey, this worked. This worked. How do we do more of this? And they're willing to have that conversation and they're putting stuff on the table. Like, our job now, really, we've been tasked, so to speak, is We've got a year's worth of funding to keep things going. We got to figure out how do we keep this going beyond this year. So we bought some time. So I posed the question to you all in your respective places. And if you're well embedded in state institutions, maybe you got some of that money in those couch cushions that you're like, this would be a good project for that. I don't know if that happens or not, but think about it. Here's the thing, we're rolling into fall and we're gonna serve now 16 to 24 out of school youth. Okay, so these are the kids. This is what I'm getting. This is what Andrea herself said. She said, I would love to have, she held her hands up like this. I would love to have a mechanism where when we see these kids slipping through our fingers, which they can see that, I can simply hand them off so that we don't lose them because it's harder to find them later. Any of us that have worked with like WIOA funds and all that stuff where we're trying to serve those kids, the hardest thing is to find that proverbial kid on the couch and get them re-engaged. And she's saying, let's just do a handoff. Oh, that was so beautiful. Anyway, so who knows where these things will go? I'm ridiculously optimistic. I think this is going to go somewhere. There's a lot of unanswered questions in respect to like how the things are going to happen, but we certainly have the right people at the table to begin to figure it out and try to put some sustainability behind this kind of programming. And it's really wonderful to have a private partner that sees it, gets it, and wants to invest. You'll pause there, yes.
Permission to add a few more elements, and then we'll do that connection to Oregon employability skills. To walk into this place in space, now the kids in that picture are identified by school or by self as the ones about to slip through the fingers. Labeled tier 2, labeled tier 3, knowing in their own path and journey, they don't want to be in school. I attended 11 times, went to the camp 11 times, and noticed immediately a different behavior amongst the students in a summer camp setting who have been labeled and living in this labeled environment for a long time. 7th week, I think the first kid missed their first morning because they were sick and they made every effort to call in and we're told, no, you can't. 100% attendance in the camp for 8 weeks from kids who don't necessarily always even really try to go to school.
That's not normal.
Yeah. Completed 12 units, which are going to serve 36 human beings in the Marion County, Salem region. Because what happened on the second 6 units, the first 6 were designed to serve a single human. The next 6 were designed to be converted, and the Church of the Park came in and acted like a customer. They did a change order with the students. They redesigned the units and they created an emergency bunkhouse for severe storms and weather situations. And these are fully insulated, fully drywalled, air conditioned and heated units. So they're able to then provide safe shelter, meeting both the state's requirements and the city's requirements. And it meets the HUD requirement, the Housing Urban Development requirement for an emergency temporary shelter. So we're working in the system to provide those local resource and opportunities. When he talks about turning and churning out units to respond to disaster calls and crises, yes. So if they're working on 12 units, but again, recall, we have 110 schools building at least 1 unit in the moment. And then I'll tell the story of Amity High School that for years had a tiny home, like an authentic tiny home, 12 foot by 28 foot. They would build it, they would tear it apart. They would build it, they would tear it apart. They would build it, they would tear it apart because they didn't have the funds to buy the next set of materials and continue to build. His graduating class of 12 this year from his advanced John Stearns at Amity High School had a kit delivered. There was 1 week of school left. There were 4 days left in their school year. He said, 4 days, get it done. You have an emergency call, answer it. All right, I got you. All right. Those kids walked out on a Thursday afternoon and graduated on a Friday, having built the cottage, which is the cottage the rancher is living in right now.
Oh,
So they got to hear that story on Wednesday from their teacher when he found out that the unit was delivered there and the pictures that went along with it. So sitting in that camp, watching those kids, 6 units being built all at once, all those kids actively engaged, all their bags up or bags down. And they never wanted to put the bags down. They just wanted to work. They were, thanks for the visitors. Thanks for all the people coming to see us, but we really want to build these things. I did not see a cell phone out once in 11 visits. I would see a team finish their task, and I would see from the wise mind learning, what they call head on a swivel, where they're always aware of their environment. So they're safe in their place and space, swivel their heads and see friends, colleagues needing help on their project, and they would go bags up and walk across the floor and get right to work. And oftentimes, never even a word between the students. They knew what needed to be done. They picked them up and they just got to working. If you want to see a wall go up fast, these kids put an entire series of walls together for 6 units in 2 days. In 6 hours, they built out all the walls on these units. So just an extraordinary experience. I want to celebrate those instructors and all the programs that came together. And this is happening at 110 schools in the state right now.
So one more thing. We drill open-ended questions, which I found adults are not expecting from a high school kid. And the reason I know that is because when I brought people out to visit, and the students would at some point pause to come up to talk to them, introduce themselves and say, so what brings you here today? Tony. They don't know how to answer. It throws them. I mean, they know how to answer the question, but they were not expecting to be asked an open-ended question. So the difference in this type of training that our instructors do is they drill that. They literally stop construction and say, all right, drills. And the kids go over and shake each other's hand, look each other in the eye, and ask some form of an open-ended question. Now, how do you get out of a conversation? So a lot of kids don't like to really engage in conversation, especially when they're just learning these social skills, right? So what we tell them is the better you get at open-ended questions, the less you have to talk. And they start connecting that, which is pretty cool. But also then we give them their out. Well, thank you very much for coming, but I got to get back to work. See you, right? And so that gives them their out. Can't tell you how many times I heard kids play that out with adults that came, especially if we brought groups of adults. So then I'd kind of wander around to listen. They would do it. So here's the thing. They can do it. They just need to be taught. And that skill is an absolute critical skill to advancement in employment.
So if there was a 2-second pause, the kids would say, well, let me tell you about what I'm learning about Oregon employability skills. I watched that happen dozens of times. So Sherry's going to share with you the 10 badges that every kid completed in the 8 weeks around the Oregon employability skills. And those kids would point up at the wall to the banner, to the item they were working on, that they were proficient in, or that they wanted to share with the visitor that was in the room within that moment.
Yeah, and thank you, Jim, for that. I'm probably just going to stay on this slide right here, Sydney, because I'm just going to speak from my heart today, because that's what we've started here today. Oregon employability skills was a what if. What if industry and education could come together? What if we could speak the same language? What if we could shore up kids who need a little bit of help? What if we could take maybe a neurodiverse student who is struggling and help them to understand why and how they could become adaptable in the workplace and they could have a long career ahead of them? What would that do in terms of economic impact for our companies and our students both? It's both of those things that you're hearing about today. You're hearing about how people are impacted all the way along. So we set out to create that common language. We said, what are we going to do? We looked back in the 1980s and we said people are starting to talk about these 21st century skills. And we just, I'm just like Jim and Tony. Let's do it. Let's do it now. Get it done. And I just started, and I had people come alongside me all the time and say, well, I can help with that, and I can help with this. We didn't have money. We just started doing it because everywhere we went, industry said, we can't advance these kids, Sherry. We're struggling to even hire them. We can't even get them to tell the story of what they know how to do. So that's what we did with Oregon employability skills. We made it a hallmark of that program to say, what is communication in the workplace? What are you going to encounter? So we built in videos where they see what's going on in the workplace. They get to do something like what's going on in the workplace. And then they get to decide, do I have that skill? Do I have a little, a lot? Where am I at? How do I move this forward? And then how do I tell that story? That's interviewing, right? The better they can come in and articulate what they can do, the better someone sitting on the other end can figure out what job, how is this going to come together? We were always telling kids, we're going to help you match your skills to careers. I have no idea what's in this building unless I get invited by Chris to come along for a tour. I can't even imagine as a student how I could, like, I don't know how to choose. So we put 55 companies in Oregon Employability Skills for them to get to see what's going on in those companies, get to do an activity aligned to adaptability, communication, collaboration, social diversity, empathy, analysis solution mindset, entrepreneurial mindset. We teach them and we go through all of those. 40 times we stop and we tell our story. And at the end, we assess them on that and we see if they can tell their story. Walked into iBuild, and I'm going to get weepy here too, but I walked into iBuild and I said, hey, any of you want to talk about your employability skills on camera? We had about 6 kids come line up immediately. We put the camera on and we let them talk. They didn't need anybody to, say, hey, I need you to talk about this, or I need to talk about that. They just did it. I'm going to show you that video in just a minute. Let's go down the slides real quickly to the skills. So keep going. There you go. So those are the 10 skills. Let's go to the next slide. I'll catch up with myself here in a minute. What if all that training was free? What if a company could use it for onboarding? What if a company could reach back to a kid and send them to the e-learning version of it that has a teacher talking in it that's going to walk them through it instead of letting them go when you've already invested in them and they're doing really good on these things, but it's like, I just got this one thing. What if that company could send them for free to that resource? What if kids were learning this in first grade? They were learning what it means to collaborate in the workplace. I learned early on from PGE that communication is mostly about keeping us safe. If you think about it, it is. How we communicate is what keeps us safe in the workplace. When you start talking to kids about that, they start getting excited because guess what? They all want to get to the workplace. Some of them drop out of school to get to the workplace, right? Because they thrive there. One of the things that industry asked us is please, 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 this is the way they said it, I'm not kidding, you know what I'm saying. Please, please, please explicitly teach these in schools. But guess what teachers said back to industry? Please, please, please find a way for our kids to do this in a learning environment of work so they can demonstrate it, they can understand it. We were sending them across this bridge that went from classroom training over here, there you go, across the bridge, into the world of work. And guess what? They lost all their resource people in the schools that are great at helping them when they need some support. They went across that bridge and that was gone. But you see, that wasn't gone in iBuild. It isn't gone in the programs that we're talking to you about. That's how we're bringing all these people together to make all of this work. So these kids, the best, well, I got the video. I'm going to let the kids say, let's go to the next slide. We have a feedback tool for industry. So if a student's out there and they're working on something, they can get some feedback. Their supervisor can look at it and say, how are you doing in communication? How are you doing in collaboration? How do you think you're doing? Let's talk about these things. So that tool was created as well. Let's go to the next slide. As I said, we have awareness, that's our elementary curriculum. We have exploration. We have the work readiness, high school and adult. We have the e-learning version. Oh, it's almost too hard to tell you all the things we have because we have avatars in there that talk to the kids. We have training videos. We have all the crosswalks that teachers would need to be able to teach this. Those things are all in there. Anytime someone said, I wish I had, we just did it. So we've created curriculum that can be used in multiple settings. It can be flexible and adaptable for any teacher teaching it. And we have tracked to about, got to change that from 90, everything moves fast, right? We're at about 100 school districts right now that we know at least one teacher is teaching it in that school district. And so it's moving fast. Our community-based organizations, we talked about, what's the one in Eugene?
Everyone does.
Yes. Yes. So they're using it now with the folks who have been homeless, who are living in those rebuilt up the sheds, the cottages. I didn't want to call them sheds, the cottages. And now they're working with those people and they're going to be training them in Oregon employability skills. So I'm just like so excited that we're coming together and doing this work. Next slide. We have a badge. I'm not going to go into that too big today, but kids, young people like badges. They like to know when they've completed something and they like to own something. So we do have badges, 240 badges just this summer at the Kroc Center. Go to the next slide. Some of you hear the word career connected learning. It's a newer term over the last couple of years. And I want to submit to you that what you just heard right now is career connected learning. Jim tells the story in Oregon Employability Skills in Empathy about the iBuilding project. The kids tell their story. Okay, it's the Kroc Center, it's Oregon Employability Skills, it's Wise Mind, it's all of these things coming together. And this is the kind of work that I think we need to keep going. Now, Jim said it earlier, his funding's up in 2 weeks. My funding is not only up in 2 weeks, my job is up in 2 weeks. Because sometimes when we start working on these projects, that's what happens. They're grant funded and then boom, the bottom drops out. We can't afford to let the bottom drop out of things like this where people are coming together and really making a difference. So I'll leave you with that. Oh, well, I'll leave you with the kids. Click on that video over there with the kids.
1 second, let me reshare it with sound so we can all hear.
Okay, thank you.
While she's setting that up, just a quick 30-second backstory. I had a mother at graduation, or not a mother, it was grandmother, come up to me with tears in her eyes and said, I really want to thank you for this program. You've really brought her grandson's name was Nathan. You really brought Nathan out of his shell. Nathan was a kid that would very hard to look you in the eye. He would put his hand out, not quite that direct eye contact yet. And it would take him a minute to like get over to you, right? So he really had to come out of his shell. The reason she was crying was because she was in an elevator a few days before that. And Nathan looked up at a stranger and said, "How are you doing today?"
Oh, that's so awesome.
I mean, that doesn't seem like a big thing, but when you're talking about a kid that has to have a skill like that to move forward in life,
Yeah.
that's a big thing for a kid, right?
Hey, Jim.
We're going to keep going.
Jim, real quick,
We don't
can
need more
you do
video.
the benefit stream on what the kids are accomplishing and qualified for after going through top or iBuild all the way to federal employment potential?
Sure. So any student that's leaving the Team Oregon Build opportunity, on the other side of that qualifies for any of the jobs that we state offer up in state funded or federal funded programs. So take the iBuild camp. Those kids walked out with all the certifications at the age of 18. I could hire them for $28 an hour at an entry level position on any construction job that we're working through the disaster recovery rebuilding efforts called Re-Oregon. That is a Davis-Bacon wage requirement. That's the lowest salary they would make entering into this construction world at that entry level position, up to in the high 80s, 90s for those long-term trades development work. So
And community college credit,
community college credit, OSHA 10
Certifications,
certification,
badges,
PPR first aid, all the
graduate high
badges.
school,
Yep, all the things,
all those.
all the things, and communication skills to wow you.
I think my favorite skill that me and a lot of people here have learned is resilience, because of no matter how many mistakes we've made, how many screws we had to take back out, and how many times we accidentally cut a board too short or a little bit too big, no matter how many times people have joked about never coming back, they always come back. I don't think we've really lost anyone.
I think my favorite skill that I've learned here is communication, because I am the general contractor of my group, which means I am the head of what we're doing. I go and report what we're doing for the day, and I need to be good at my job or things could go bad and we could end up wasting material. I was really struggling with figuring out how to get my group to do what I was saying to do, because I'm not really good at bossing people around. I'm good at taking orders, not giving them. And I had to really think about how I would communicate with my coworkers without sounding rude, but also making sure they stayed on task.
it's amazing to work with these people because I've watched them all grow, basically. These people weren't as much into it at the beginning as they are now. So it's great to see people willing to do the work and be excited about it the next day.
This program helped me with communication a lot because I used to be really shy and I wouldn't really do stuff like this, but this showed me that it's not that bad to talk to people or to meet new people. This communication helps you with a lot of skills, work skills, partner skills. So if you guys have a problem, you guys can communicate it and not fix it, and then it will become a big deal later.
I think this program is really good for younger kids like me to have an opportunity to get hands-on experience with working and things like that, and we're doing it for a really good cause.
Favorite skill? Definitely communication. It's probably the most important thing here. Talking to each other, making sure we all know what's going on and what the numbers are, how much we need, and honestly just what we're doing. Communication is the most basic part of this, and learning about how to properly communicate and how to efficiently communicate with each other is super helpful, honestly.
I think what Todd was hinting at was Klamath Community College, Lane Community College, Schmeck Community College, CTE programs are getting together to talk about how to be those pathway destinations for kids coming out of Team Oregon Build to go right into fully credentialed training and those apprenticeship programs. So the conversation is just every time it sparks a conversation and creates opportunity. So we hope that you'll consider all the what ifs and get a hold of any of us at any point in time.
Yeah, and one of the great things that's happening alongside of this that we're going to shift to now is that Jenny Newby has been leading some great work at 9 of the community colleges that received, like TTT, funding from Department of Labor under the Strengthening Community Colleges grant. We have been working tirelessly to align the work that she's doing around employability skills with the work that's happening here around employability skills. So Jenny's here to share some of that good stuff.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I can't
Yes.
tell. I can kind of see you in the
I can
room.
see you.
So thank you all for having me here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm sorry that I can't be there in person. I am going to talk about Oregon employability skills from the perspective of the Strengthening Community Colleges grant. We are a $5 million grant, 4 years. It is coming to an end. It ends January 31st, 2025. There are 9 of the 17 community colleges. So if you could move the slide forward, that would be helpful. Sorry, I'm watching it on my screen and thank you. We have a variety of partners across the state and a third-party evaluator that doesn't really have anything to do with the skills. If you could go to the next slide. Our grant is really focused on systems change in the spaces of advanced manufacturing and cybersecurity. Next slide, please, which shows the 9 colleges. Mount Hood Community College is the lead. You can see that the colleges are around the state. Again, 9 of the 17 that are in Oregon. And next slide. We have key outputs and outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and you can see a variety of them. And the one we're focused on today is digital badging. So that's a large part of our systems change approach. If you could go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about our project. We contracted with a national consultant, Digital Credentials Institute out of Madison College in Wisconsin. They've been in the digital credentials space for at least 15 years. It was really helpful to bring on a national consultant to work with us when you're working with 9 colleges across the state. We had a badging work group that met twice a month for about 18 months. And if you could go to the next slide, we really focused on how could we create a framework for employability skills, aligning to the work that's going on through the WTDB and the Workforce Readiness Committee and the work of Oregon employability skills that Sherry just talked about. How could we align to that work? And how could we create a way to articulate the employability skills that are already being taught in our CTE programs. Again, the grant is narrow, so it focuses on 2 program areas, but we created the employability skills framework in a way that could be used in any CTE program. So it's not specific to manufacturing or cyber. We wanted to find a way to demonstrate the skills that were already in the curriculum and have a tangible badge, if you will, that students could earn as part of a course. If you want to go to the next slide, please. We developed a framework. It's a stackable framework. So there are 4 skill categories: communication, critical thinking, self-management, digital literacy. And within those 4 skill categories, there are digital badges in each of those. So there are 4 knowledge badges, there are 13 skill badges, and there are 4 ability badges. And the idea with the faculty and the staff that created this framework was that we wanted to have students be able to earn more than 1 badge in a particular area, and then they could demonstrate knowledge or they could demonstrate skill or ability. If you see the next slide, it kind of it shows an example in our communication area of the stackability. So a student could earn a knowledge badge in basic communication. They could earn 4 skill badges in reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and those all culminate in an ability badge in communication. If you want to go to the next slide, if you get these handouts, which I hope are shared with you, you can click on any of these. We are using a badging platform called Credly. Each of the 9 colleges has a landing page. I don't know, Sydney, if you got my next one, but I had an example in the slide, so don't worry about that. But if you click on those links at some point, you can see what one of our badges looks like. If you go to the next slide, we have been piloting this particular framework since last summer. As you can see, we're going into fall term 2024, and all 9 colleges will be piloting different employability skills badges. If you go to the next slide, you can see how many and what types of badges have been piloted. So obviously in summer last year, we were just getting started. And then all the way up to spring, which ended in June, we've been offering time management, initiative, resilience, which the student just mentioned, like not ours, but that was a skill that was really important to him in the iBuild program. Right, problem solving, time management, adaptability. So you can see all of the skills. To date, as of June 30th, we have issued 222 badges through this pilot. And we have a variety of resources. Again, this is a product of a federal grant, which requires that we share everything that we developed. So everything that we developed is on our Skills Commons shelf, which is, if you go to the next slide, Sydney, thank you. I know this is hard from a distance. There is a handle that you could click on and you can go to our Skills Commons shelf, and it has all of our badging resources, from our shared rubrics that the faculty are using in the classes to all of the criteria for each of the badges. But in having conversations with Todd and Charlie and with Donna Llewellyn at CCWD, just thinking about like what our future vision might be. If you could go to the next slide. Some of the things that I think about are, how do we align our systems from K-12 and post-secondary around employability skills? How do we build upon and expand on the framework and the OES and this particular framework? How do we think about more CTE programs and pathways implementing employability skills and embedding them in their programming? How do we touch on, again, I'm speaking from the community college perspective, how do we really touch on adult basic skills? Some of those knowledge badges seem to fit really well within WIOA Title II. Integrated education and training, thinking about non-credit training certificates. If you could go to the next slide, and just really thinking about what how can we build on the success of this particular program and this framework? And how do we think about carrying it into other programmings? Thinking about the adult education attainment goal, thinking about how we need to have technical training and provide employers with work-ready candidates, something that we all like to talk about and we all work hard to do. If I had a short-term vision, just since I'm part of a national grant, there are other states that are really looking at how to implement not only employability skills, but also micro-credentials using digital badges. So thinking about how do we find funding at the state level to support some kind of state level implementation. And if I had a dream of all dreams, I would think that other states are starting to create digital credentials institutes with directors. And that would be something that I would recommend that the state of Oregon think about how do we at the state level really think about alignment, system, micro-credentialing, and employability skills. So that's all I have. Are there any questions or thoughts?
Thank you, Jenny. One thing I wanted to call out, and I appreciated what Tony said earlier about having the connection point at the Talent Summit and just reminding everyone to see how all this kind of connects together with our priorities. At the Talent Summit, remember, we had to vote on the 5 priorities, and one of them was housing. That people in the attendance said was really important, and then aligning, the work with the integration with K through 12. So this work that you all just illuminated is very much in alignment with the priorities that, we heard from all of our peers across the state. So thank you so much for all the good work that's being done. And, what I heard loud and clear was the need for continued alignment and the need for, I think, keeping things top of mind so that when people find those pennies in the couches, they're thinking of you all first, and how we can be advocates for that. And then really importantly, continuing to talk about your outcomes, sort of in a regular forum so that it is, very much part of what people are thinking about. So when those opportunities arise, we think of you all first. So anyway, thank you for that. We are going to take a quick break. We will take a break until 2:35.
Oh, yes. Nice to meet you.
I'm actually.
If I had to.
Oh, a shout out to Zach.
Yeah, I had next to speak to. You can imagine.
I could imagine.
Things.
The reason why. Yeah. Sorry, man. So, so. We're kind of focused also a little bit on, like, the employment flow.
Yeah. Sure.
So we were able to decide on the guy of the data. I remember.
Good. How about you, Sydney?
So the training Jim was talking about.
Get ready to,
I always wanted them.
oh, nice.
I really did. You do that.
Great suggestion. So.
But
I'm just
So,
gonna
like,
say. What you said.
yeah. I like. Yes, yeah. Yeah, oh, man, well, that's great that you. Okay.
So it's put down 14, and I'm always, that's until you get to class.
Migraines. I just heard the other day. You heard that? Yeah. For insurance, right? Yeah. All the. Yeah, yeah. You know a couple. Several members. Tell you what, yeah.
Shove it in.
Yeah, yeah, I have a really good friend who is,
So we kind of
completely, so it's not, she's gluten free.
So.
Yeah, but if she gets any gluten, she doesn't know she's gonna. I mean, it's just like, so it's, I mean, home in a super controlled environment, she's fine, but going out.
But we are making it work.
Sure. Yeah, her too. Get the pressure. Yep, yep. No, it doesn't. That would have done you, I mean, I was like, oh, I feel that. Like, here's your popping. I mean, it's like. Everything. Sarah, you can actually work. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been to a couple of these meetings and it was messy, but I was. Yeah, no, I would just say it's, but my scope is here at National Arts. But I was really just trying to figure out how to stuff to do that. Others.
I don't really want
You have to get the Botox in the right place too. I mean, like where it is you causing the action. So I could just, well, you're supposed to do your eyes. I can just send you that word. That's all right. Yeah, yeah. It's just like a little bit, but I could. Mine's pretty straightforward. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so.
You get lucky, yeah. How's your mom? I know. Well, she's close. That's cozy. I was, there it goes. You see her person.
Migraines, I don't go down.
You don't, yeah.
And I'll respond with, like we developed it through.
I don't think I'm gonna see her. I don't think I'm gonna see her.
It's not. Not even go there.
Yeah, I think it's end of September. I mean, I think. Okay.
I know it's somewhere.
But she can kill it.
27.
Yeah.
So like, you know, this is like, there's gone, we got a lot of time to do stuff. It's not learning.
Yeah.
And then that may be a big background work.
Yeah. She knows. Yeah, wait till parenthood. It's your custom phase. Much exposure to stuff.
But we're just talking about, let's just.
No. That's great. Oh, fun.
For now, as our.
I remember when
Really interesting.
like, wedding weekend, I had.
I mean, we have a ton of community that.
I was like,
A lot of our.
I was like, how was it? She said, I'm exhausted. It was great, but it was so, I'm so tired. Like, I kind of went through the whole thing. Then I found out a week later, she's like in her first trimester. Yeah. No wonder you're exhausted. You do that. It's been a wedding. It's like, yeah. It's like, it's a whole dynamic question, like, like you're in a work person, I had a friend and had a wedding in her like a dress, and like dress, like fire, we have wedding and found out she was pregnant, 4 months. And dress. She got it.
And
do some-
That is planned. Oh,
So I have two and it's a bonus. I have bonus total, but one bonus.
If you go to like.
He is, he is 215. I've been in his life for 2. So.
That was. That would be great.
So. Yeah, the early years. Wish I would have been there. But I think that's okay. But my two, my son is 30. Yeah, that was a hard 30. In a previous life.
Yeah. It's like they got a lot, right or wrong too.
For this, I think
If I had a magic wand, I would say.
we talked about this before. I was 27 when my son. I mean, baby's later now, so I think that's part of it. And my daughter's 28. And once I have one, so.
I saw you.
Right. Now my bonus, well, and then then when my Raspberry DHS, it's not true. And then I got this other kid who was 8 at the time, and I didn't think about that. And so now, that's right back in last year. And Alejandro went to OSU. Finally, to get to be empty nester, and then he did home this summer. And he's going, not that I'm counting the days, next Saturday, we're taking him down to Corvallis. It's like, go. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I can have a lot of questions in that area. Yeah. Like, great. He graduated. You can imagine. Yeah.
It's like, it's like a fighting where it's. You're like.
Well, that's okay. Yeah. Okay. Here's your video. Glad you're working with Rachel.
Oh, she.
Yeah, that's tough.
She was at 18.
And some,
And so she.
they don't, I mean.
She was like.
Connect with her. Yeah.
She's like.
No, I don't even think we can really.
How do I connect you to other people?
Yeah.
Other. Because of the.
And my son lives in New York. She now lives in. Yeah. But, we got one much older nephew boy that, well, it's good to meet you. Are both in Salem. And they're all in the grade.
It's still on the radar.
It sounded interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was, they get together, it's nice, wants to talk,
Vacation.
chat, but
I think they might have given me a credit run. I'm like, there is no way.
Yeah,
That's just how stressful.
I'm expecting, and to.
I just saw that. I'm like, there's already a vacation. That's so
I
cute.
think they say.
Gotta do.
They were probably like, you're
This
just
relationship is about
We haven't got
your dad and me and
That's I
all the collateral that we brought with us, but not your loving responsibility.
So, yeah.
But that one was like.
Exactly. And no expectations.
And then you always wonder, like Trader did, I don't want to say, she was just saying she couldn't even get set up.
Yes.
Oh, and they were like, it's not that.
That's kind of chill.
So my work cell.
Oh, you don't got that.
Replace it anyway.
He's gonna, about to have a baby.
So.
She's gonna have a baby in like a week. You know how old she is. She's gonna be 35, 36.
Take that.
It's the protective screen.
Yeah. You will check my dad.
I'm not risk for dropping. And it's huge. I'm like, why is this for your daughter? Just way to really meet with
That's the guy I'm.
I go in once.
The other side.
Okay.
Totally.
But I was going into the heck of
Okay.
Something. You're always in the. That's great. I like
That, I mean, she got married. My partner was in her LMA, and she came back from her wedding. She had this crazy
But there isn't a super rich fancy, but the library,
Yeah, I mean, like printed, like I envisioned kind of like YMCA camp.
Right.
And they invited all the family and friends to spend the weekend. And
yep.
yeah, I mean, I think like.
Getting that little extra work area.
It's a,
She said,
yeah,
it's
it's
exhausted. And she was like, you know, I didn't nobody else. That's what I found out later. I was like, God, please.
great, it's a great speed. I don't think
So
it's-
tired, so tired. And you have sweaty.
And like when you're in, I don't know, I didn't.
So we.
Yeah.
Walking out that.
Oh.
So, yeah. Grabbing anything.
Have you, she's.
Get your spot.
She is a tiny little, she is the head of the office.
And the community honest.
So she's like the Carol Hubbard. She's a big basis. And she is.
Yeah.
Like, students are, she's very, like, give them.
So it was really.
Good.
So it was enough time.
No, just great.
Right.
But,
Get rid of everything out of your head. It's just, you know.
so fun. Check in. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I feel like I. Yeah, no,
So I'll
I
try
think
and-
that's- Yeah, that's Thursday.
Well, that's what
Have that.
you're just worried about.
Yeah, right, oh my God. Yeah, maybe.
Feel like I want to use more.
You'll know how to manage. Yeah. And it's ready to start. Yeah. All right, let's be ready.
So I'll ping her next week. Like, doing this.
Great. Okay, next up, I'm really excited to have Kyle Thomas with us here today, who is the Policy and Legislative Affairs Director at the HEC. And Kyle is going to provide us with a legislative overview and some updates. Kyle is online and we welcome you here today, Kyle.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you. My name is Kyle Thomas, Director of Legislative and Policy Affairs for HEC, and my apologies that I'm not able to be with you in person today. I'm going to give a sort of a really just brief overview about where we are in policy and budget development as it relates to preparation for the 25 session, which covers the 2025 to 2027 biennial budget. And provide some comments about sort of involvement of board members and the board in the legislative process. I think my prepared remarks will be sort of relatively brief, but I am, of course, happy to answer any questions that you have. So we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. HEC as a state government agency is involved in a pretty comprehensive and lengthy process of budget and policy planning as it relates to preparation for any given long session. And I've broken that out for you just very generally. These are not, really hard lines that exist between any of these categories here, but generally it's a four-phase process that leads us from conceptualization of budget and policy concepts up through decision making and into the legislative session. That conceptualization phase really starts as early as agencies want it to. So for HEC, that actually started for us at about December 2023, getting ready for January 2025. So a little over 13 months of time before the gavel comes down to start the legislative session, although agency by agency, this will be different. This is about the time when budget instructions are being released from the Department of Administrative Services that sort of govern this entire process. It's the time when agencies are really developing problem statements, considering sort of several possible solutions to those problem statements that sort of consider all of the context and history around previous attempts to solve those problems. It's the time when we're sort of reaching out to begin partner engagement at the discretion of the governor's office. Each governor is a little bit different. So this process is of course tied to the desires of the governor and their own specific process preferences and timing preferences. So it does change from administration to administration, but generally speaking, this is about when agencies start. As that process moves on, we sort of get into the second phase of drafting, where the current service level budget, which just definition for those not aware, the current service level is the cost of doing in the next biennium what we're currently doing this biennium when you consider, inflation, program startup into sort of full-fledged programmatic costs, program phase-outs, and sort of eliminating any one-time funding from the budget. The current service level is the number that accounts for all that. Once agencies have that number, they start to build their policy option packages, which are written to account for current service level and are sort of projected as pluses or minuses to the current service level. And it's during this period when our first round submissions to the governor's office and the chief financial office are due, and we're starting to think about elements of scalability. We want to hit a home run, of course, and have a $100 million new investment in area XYZ. But what can we do if we only got a $50 million investment? What can we do if we only got a $20 million investment? It's at this time when we're starting generally to have conversations with policy advisors in the governor's office and advocates around, what happens if the resources are not available to operate sort of the most ideal version of what it is we're planning for. As we head further into the summer and the fall, we get to sort of where we are now. Which is all of the costing for policy option packages is finalized. When all the budget narratives are completely written for HEC, the agency request budget has now been submitted. That was due by September 1st, and it was adopted by our commission earlier in the month of August. And then we sort of head into the final phase, which is where Legislative Council is doing all of its drafting. We're sort of strategizing and preparing, what bills are going to go into what committee. How are we going to be engaging with legislators about this bill? Finalizing our messaging, finalizing coalitions around particular asks or particular programmatic changes. And that all leads into the legislative session that begins in January of 2025. So that's generally how this works. Next slide, please. As it relates to this particular legislative cycle, it's of course governed by the resources and revenue that the state projects to have available, as well as the governor's priorities. So for this particular cycle, HEC as a state agency was limited in its agency request budget to asking for no greater than 1% above the agency's current service level. So for HEC, that's approximately $31 million. This is a real shift in how the agency builds its recommended budget. In past years, under prior administrations, we were essentially unbounded in what we asked the governor to consider as part of their governor's request budget that gets released in December. And so that meant we asked for large-scale transformational investments across a wide swath of our agency's programs. And even building brand significant scale new programs. One example is for our financial aid programs, our particularly the state's largest financial aid program, the Oregon Opportunity Grant. I believe it was 2 budget cycles ago, we asked for $800 million in new funding. This governor has come in and asked agencies, it's been more specific and more directive about what agencies can ask for. And has been more sort of collaborative at the front end in working with agencies to shape those agency request budgets such that the governor's office has a far greater understanding at the time that agencies submitted those budgets exactly what agencies were going to request. An additional sort of specific process change this time around is that there is, as there was as we headed into the 2023 long legislative session when Governor Kotek had just been elected and did not sort of have a full cycle of budget development. There is expected to be a very specific focus on the governor's priority issue areas. That's housing production, that's behavioral health, and it's pre-K through grade 12 education. So all of those issue areas are, to the extent possible, based on revenue forecasts that come out between now and when the final legislative budget is adopted, probably in late June, are likely to see additional new investment. So agencies that are not in those issue areas have been limited, and agencies that are directly involved in those issue areas have, in conjunction with very close governor's office collaboration, submitted budgets that aren't necessarily capped in the same way that HEC's budget is capped. So you look at those issue areas, housing, behavioral health, pre-K-12, there's obviously workforce components there. HEC is not driving those particular workforce conversations. Those conversations are being driven by the governor's office, but certainly HEC and partners we work with could be beneficiaries of investments that are related to those issue areas to the extent they do have workforce components. So, and for a couple of these, we have been at the table and will continue to be at the table. Other specifics to this budget cycle is that state budget resources are relatively stable. The current revenue forecast, actually the updated revenue forecast that just came out a week or two ago, shows really neither an influx of state revenue projected for the next biennium, nor does it really forecast a decrease. And so the state's capacity for new investment is really limited by the fact that the resources the state is projected to have are not likely to dramatically increase. Current service level projections, or at least the last projections that I saw, showed that the state was spending sort of about what it projects to take in the next biennium as a current service level. So unless there are sort of adjustments in existing programs, it will be hard to find a lot of additional new revenue, absent sort of revenue increases that I have not heard anyone talk about, to invest in new programs. And I've already covered the last point that the governor's team is sort of involved much more directly with agencies this time around. Next slide, please. So what does this environment and these restrictions mean for HEC? So HEC has adopted 7 policy option packages for inclusion in the agency request budget. And so just very briefly, the first 4 are on the screen now, the next 3 are on the next slide. Those are in the areas of IT modernization. This is a technical project for HEC that helps HEC to modernize and update its legacy IT systems. The most important of those is our student financial aid system, which, as I think you can imagine, contains a large amount of confidential data that's protected by federal law, and sort of manages the flow of resources from HEC to institutions for student financial aid. It also will include a module that will help us manage the eligible training provider list. So we're asking the legislature for about $5 million to continue the modernization of HEC's IT framework. The next POP is the Early Learning Professional Grant. We're also asking for around $5 million for this one. This is a scholarship and grant program that was passed into law probably about 4 years ago at this point, but the legislature never funded. And this would provide direct grants to students who were seeking to pursuing degrees that would lead to careers in early childhood education. The next POP relates to Future Ready Oregon. This is not a POP that's asking for any increased general fund resources, but is asking for a continuation of the ability to spend federal resources, and I'll get into this one in just a moment. Pop number 4 or Pop 105 on your screen is the Oregon Opportunity Grant. This is an increase of approximately $21 million for additional grant aid to the neediest students in the state of Oregon. Next slide. And then the final 3 POPs. None of these are sort of general funded as well. We've already in the last slide, the POPs that I put on the screen spent the $31 million that I stated was the cap for HEC. These 3 POPs are not related to that cap. One would be to take over from the Teacher Standards Practices Commission an educator administrator scholarship program that supports direct grants to students who are culturally and linguistically diverse candidates for teacher administrator or for educator administrator licenses. In Oregon, this mirrors a program that we already operate for culturally and linguistically diverse teacher candidates. And then, of course, we have what we do every 2 years, which is we rank public university and community college capital construction projects. And ultimately, the legislature determines sort of where on that ranking list they'd like to draw the line and fund projects for the next the next biennium. Next slide, please. So specifically for Future Ready Oregon, which I mentioned just a moment ago, we're asking the initial conception of this package and this continuation of this program did call for $75 million in state general fund investment. We have not submitted that in the agency request budget, so we're left with asking the legislature to reauthorize the federal funds that we got from the American Rescue Plan Act that served this program. That's $62.5 million, and that will help this program continue into the next biennium. There is an associated legislative concept here, mostly minor updates and incorporation of lessons learned into some statutory amendments. I think the primary thrust of which, as it relates to the Workforce and Talent Development Board, is to increase the conjunction and collaboration that would exist between Future Ready Oregon programming and Workforce and Talent Development Board and local workforce board programming. Next slide, please. So does this request budget meet higher education and workforce needs? I think the answer is clearly no. It's a highly limited budget request that falls well short of what the HEC Commission would, in an ideal situation, hope to adopt. And so you see a little sort of blurb here that I've put up on the screen that represents a much longer letter to the governor that the commission submitted concurrently to the agency recommended budget that indicates that the commission, of course, has some significant reservations about how this budget would impact higher education workforce development. Next slide, please. Specifically as it relates to Workforce and Talent Development Board related activity, sort of here are the 3 areas of concern that the commission identified in that letter are obvious shortfalls or obvious gaps that would be created or would persist under the agency recommended budget if that budget ultimately became the governor's recommended budget and if that budget were ultimately adopted sort of fundamentally unaltered by the legislature. So you see the Oregon, Future Ready Oregon winds down in the next biennium. Local workforce boards sort of go back to really primarily being limited to WIOA funding. And Oregon Conservation Corps grant-making activity would cease. Very quickly, the Oregon Conservation Corps is a program that was created in a comprehensive wildfire mitigation package that provides grant opportunities to organizations that are doing activities that employ youth in fire mitigation, sort of land clearing type activity. Next slide, please. Now, just because our agency request budget is limited does not mean that we're sort of going to sit on the sidelines for the duration of the legislative session and kind of just hope the ARB becomes law. Obviously, legislators, once they get into town, will all have their own ideas. They'll all have their own policy proposals. They'll all have their own budget requests. And it's sort of just as incumbent upon me and upon the agency to engage with those as it is in the planning process around a governor's recommended budget. So, we will be, of course, looking for opportunities for the agency to engage in workforce development policy planning and working with legislators to clarify any proposals that they do have that may lead ultimately to budget items that get into the Ways and Means process and into the legislatively adopted budget. Specifically, those opportunities are certainly likely in the areas that are on your screen now. We're certainly aware of various sort of initiatives that are either being worked on in the governor's office or that individual legislators or advocacy organizations that HEC typically partners with in these areas. So we do expect that conversations will occur in the legislature. Next slide. Yes.
Kyle, it's Ann. Question for you. We just heard a really amazing presentation or set of presentations, all kind of tied to, sort of learning in the K-12 space and housing, kind of linking the two together. So maybe checks the box on housing production, and then maybe to some extent early learning workforce. Early might be a little bit of a stretch, but how do we at the WTDB make sure that the people that are pushing forward and advocating through the HEC and at the legislature are aware of these opportunities? I want to make sure we're not losing things that are already in flight that maybe need some more funding and the ability to be sustainable versus somebody having to think up something new, when we go through this process, because there's some amazing work that we get to hear about at the WTDB. And sometimes I'm not sure, how is it getting eyes on it, like at the HEC or other places where maybe people go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. We should go ahead and fund, or we should go ahead and make sure this category of funding goes here because there's these cool projects going on in our state.
So you have asked what ultimately is the best, I think, possible lead-in question to my last slide, and then some information I'll share with you that is not on that slide. And that it really does center on the question of, well, how can the WTDB, both as individuals and as a board, sort of get more involved in the policy space? And so the slide that you have on your screen now first is like it's unfortunate. It's the Mother May I slide that I sort of have to put on there, just that shows what it is that members can do individually, and then I'll speak to what the board really can do in a moment. So first is individual members of the board who come to the board appointed because you have significant interests and expertise that correlate to the activities of the board and more broadly the activities of the state relative to workforce and development. You individually can absolutely use your knowledge and networks to track issues. You can bring emerging legislative issues to the attention of HEC staff and emerging sort of workforce development issues to the attention of legislators or legislative staff, if you wish to. So long as you are really engaging in your personal or professional capacity, and not necessarily as engaging solely as a member of the Workforce and Talent Development Board. You can also feel free to invite legislators or partners to engage with us. You undoubtedly, most of you have personal relationships or with organizations that are regularly dealing with the legislature, if not legislators themselves, or I'm certain some of you have relationships with legislators that serve on committees that are key to the workforce talent development space, or other committees where there are conversations that could have a WTDB related policy or budget item in them. You can certainly go out and invite legislators to any legislators to engage with us. We do ask on the right side of the slide that you don't do that as a speaking on behalf of the WTDB unless you're granted permission to do so. And if you're doing so, that you're not promoting views and positions that are not officially supported by the WTDB, the agency of the governor's office. So you can go as a business person to the legislature and use that knowledge that you've accumulated throughout your career and testify on a bill and meet with legislators. You can even identify yourself as a WTDB member, so long as you sort of clarify that you're not speaking on behalf of the WTDB, unless the agency has asked you to do so and it's related it's related to something that the governor's office or HEC has supported or been given permission to support. Now, that's what you can do individually. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I put you on the spot a little bit?
Sure.
What, in your opinion, and maybe if it's easier for you to answer this personally, that's fine. What, in your opinion, is the most effective way? I understand, I thank you for eliminating kind of the boundaries of how to do it. But like, for example, today, we had people here in person, and rather than PowerPointing us or, us writing a letter, I'm just wondering, like, is it better for us to invite somebody here or us to go to them, have people in? I just feel like sometimes we're so bombarded by email, letters, Does it get any traction versus if you have somebody a human connecting with somebody else to say, like, I want to tell you about this thing and the outcomes that we're driving and achieving. So what is your opinion? Like, how can we be most impactful?
So that is a hard question to answer in the abstract, because I think the answer changes depending on sort of where we are in the cycle or what your ask really truly is, or whether or not, it depends on sort of what partners are involved. I will say, generally speaking, without sort of knowing without regards to any specific issue, in-person sort of small group one-on-one communications with legislators are more valuable than sending an email. Even more valuable than that is coming to a legislator sort of with a coalition of people that are behind you on an issue that all sort of represent the same, or at least a very similar viewpoint. Better than that is having members of the coalition that are tied to interests that the legislator has by virtue of the constituency that they represent. Those sort of personal engagements, personal impacts, connections to that legislator's individual community are typically what grabs the attention of legislators the most. I've been sort of casually working back and forth with the Oregon Conservation Corps about the prospect of having legislators come out to the sites where young adults, 18 to 24-year-olds, are climbing trees and progressively cutting them down so that the house that's on that property isn't caught up if there is a wildfire that's in the area. So all the fuels that exist around the house are mitigated and that house stays standing. That kind of tactile experience where a legislator can come out and shoot a catapult, a rope over a tree so that the tree can be tensioned and cut down safely. Like, those are really tactile experiences where legislators can sort of touch and feel and talk to people that are in their district that are direct beneficiaries of state funds. I've never seen legislators walk away from those kinds of experiences sort of really dissatisfied or unhappy that they've gone. So those are just, I think, a couple of examples of ways that you can grab legislators' attention. And of course, it all depends on sort of where in the cycle you are and what your ask is. Getting more specific, it is really hard to tell you what the best strategy is without sort of knowing the issue and all of the players involved, and just deciding first what is your message, what is it that you want to say, what is your ask, ultimately will dictate which strategy, I think, or set of strategies is most appropriate. That leads me into the into sort of a few more points about what the board can do to increase future connections to policy making and policy planning. The first is that I want you all to know that HEC, as of Monday, is actively hiring for another legislative affairs person to provide and that person's portfolio is going to be predominantly workforce. So we have, I think, been under capacity in legislative affairs as this agency has expanded, particularly over the last few years, and particularly as the legislature has indicated increased desire and willingness to fund specific workforce initiatives with state dollars. When I got here several years ago, that appetite was not there the way it is today. And so we are hiring for someone who can better help us track those opportunities for engagement. And it's my hope that that individual will, it's not my hope, I'll be managing part of this individual's time. I intend to sort of task that individual to engage with Todd and Julia and the entire workforce operation at HEC in order to be able to monitor all the opportunities and discussions the legislature's having to find specific opportunities where the board can become more engaged in policy planning. The other opportunity that's sort of, I think, immediately available that I see is that the governor has just hired a new workforce policy advisor. That policy advisor comes from HEC. She was the Future Ready
Kyle,
Oregon.
I'm here.
Oh,
He's
you're here.
with us.
Hi. There is. Well, now this is awkward that you're in the room.
Just in
but,
case you were going to say something awkward.
Yeah. So I think now we have an opportunity and attention to sort of build that relationship back up and increase the visibility of the WTDB within the governor's office. Whereas prior to Sarah's hiring, that attention was a little bit more diffuse. It was just there was just a little bit of a gap there that hopefully is filled now that Sarah is on board. Welcome, Sarah. Congratulations. The next sort of point I think I'd make is that there is probably an opportunity for you to engage more, both as a board and as staff that are tasked with the board, with the state agencies that have direct oversight in the specific areas of local of interest that either local boards have or you have with regards to workforce development, and that could potentially provide an opportunity, increased opportunity to shape policy or even distribute funds. Right? If there is I'll just throw it out there. If there's a housing workforce package, right, the Workforce and Talent Development Board certainly has the capacity, if it works with the housing department and state agents at the state enterprise level, to sort of to convince folks that it has a role to play in funds distribution. I'm not saying go out and try and get money that would otherwise go to the Department of Housing, but go out and work with the housing department to convince that agency that the WTDB and the local workforce boards have the capacity and have the infrastructure to meaningfully help that department spend resources that it may have available for housing production or whatever agency gets those sorts of resources. So there are myriad opportunities. There's no there's no sort of silver bullet that's going to cause the WTDB to sort of suddenly become more engaged. But these are opportunities, I think, that can build that capacity for engagement and involvement and raise the visibility of the WTDB as an important workforce development entity in the state over the course of some time and energy. I think that's it. All I have for my presentation. I'm happy to answer other questions.
Kyle, this is Kim Parker Jadenis. This is my first meeting at this table. So I have a question about if there is a bill that a legislator has introduced, perhaps in partnership with the Oregon Workforce Partnership, theoretically, what would the process be for the state board to determine whether or not they could be supportive of this legislator's bill?
Yeah, so ultimately, that's a good question. Thank you. At the end of the day, state agencies, and that includes the boards and commissions that support state agencies and the governor, don't take official positions on legislation unless approved by the governor. So we start as supporters of anything that ends up in the agency request budget and any legislative concepts that we introduce. For the rest of the initiatives that may be out there, we take a default position of essentially no position. Now, that being said, we freely provide information to legislators about impacts and provide them with information and provide them with expertise that would help them shape legislation in a way that is more easily implementable, more related to or more accommodating of the sort of workforce resources that the agency has available to deploy things, that recognizes sort of generally how an agency may sort of execute specific functions that are related to the legislature's bill. I would say that first part of that is the most important. Like we will tell a legislator how we perceive what we perceive as the impacts of their legislation, positive or negative. If we wish to go further than that, we really do have to involve the governor's office. Ultimately, we are the governor's sort of representative agencies on any specific issue, and we act on her sort of on her behalf. So there is a process internally that staff can use if either requested to by the WTDB, or if we on our own or our programmatic offices have a piece of legislation we think is particularly valuable to support or oppose, can initiate that request. So if, as the session rolls on and the WTDB sees legislation, and there's one thing in particular it thinks is something that is sort of a must support, we can make that request. But it is a process to getting to yes that involves an inquiry to the governor's office.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. I think I'm going to wrap this section unless there's some burning something we need to raise. Okay, thank you so much for being with us today, for taking our questions and keeping us top of mind. We're going to shift the agenda a little bit since we're a little bit behind. What I've asked Todd to do for the item from Coragio is to have them do a written update for us. So we'll just send that out as a written update following this meeting. And then if we want to have them back to do that, we can do that at our next meeting. And then we'll go now to item 4.4 on our agenda, discussion on priorities, alignment, funding, and sustainability with Charlie Hopewell, chairman of the board for Jewett-Cameron, and Craig Pope, County Commissioner for Polk County. So I'll turn it over to the two of you.
You and me.
Oh.
That's what, I'll tell you what, if I jump off into this, I'm gonna just take the example of today's presentation. And Ann, I think you're kind of driving us there to, here's the body that should be making a statement to the state. You gotta take care of this. You've got to keep moving this, a project like this forward. This is craziness to me, that these folks work this hard, come and show us success. We can all wrap our arms around it and absolutely say, you bet. Absolutely. There's a scorecard here. That's what we're always looking for these investments. And now what? Now what do we do? I mean, it is part of the challenge that I think Charlie and I would like to present to you all today. It's like, what's our authority? What's our capability of actually moving the ball? Here we are with this project today that I think we're all passionate about. Let's move this. Let's make certain that it's sustainable. Let's figure this out and let's take action. I don't know what that is now. Again, Tim asked a great question. Not surprised by the answer, of course, because we're all mired in this political process for funding. And we apparently don't have enough of a voice yet. I'm hoping that we can move that. to say, there's a scorecard, let's fix this one. And I would add right now, as Harris talked about earlier, we're co-chairs on a forestry workforce steering committee. We're spending $300,000 that the legislature put in a bill and directed us to put together a survey, a study of the workforce in the forestry and wood products industry. That's due in June of 2025. When that's done, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do with it? Are we just gonna are we gonna shelve it? Are we gonna hand it off to HEC and say, okay, we accomplished that goal, check the box? And so I'm being very passionate about it, but as somebody who sat on a workforce board or engaged with workforce board development work for 30 years, that's why I work my way to this level, because I want to see us move successful projects forward, show our worker community that we're serious about these things, our educators we're serious about these things, and our employer community that we're going to grapple with their problems and embrace the solutions we find to work with today's workforce challenges. Charlie.
I thought it would be tough to follow Tony. You know, it's not very much, and your passion is shared by myself as well. So let's take a step back for a second. What this workforce board did was amazing with the Talent Summit. It brought together resources and communities across the state, and it put people together to be able to be creative, to network, to share, to learn, and so forth. And so the Workforce Talent Development Board, as a convening body, has a place, I think, in Oregon's infrastructure very, very clearly. We're advisors to the governor. Sarah, by the way, welcome, and thank you very much for being here. But we are advisors to the governor. And as such, as I go through Todd Nell had reminded me to re-review my roles and responsibilities. And I found the word develop 14 times. I found the word strategize 8 times in the documents. Similar to Craig's issues or his presentation here, it's really what is our purpose for this, because the piece I think we really need to think about, which I don't think is getting enough of our collective attention, is how does an idea become sustainable? And so there is a process, and let me take the OES as an example. So the OES was a concept based upon a lot of dollars and a lot of survey work and a lot of connectivity through the state of Oregon. And in that work, it was profoundly demonstrated that business and industry in this state, region, and nation was seeking some form of advancement in education for both education and workforce in basic employability skills. And this body said, this is important. And not only is it important, but because we are conveners, we're going to create a subcommittee, of which I'm the co-chair, and we're going to put this process and we're going to drive it forward. Great decision. And so then we run into the same thing that we talked about here with Jim and Craig, you just spoke of. And by the way, huge thanks to Willamette Education Service District. And I want to give you a moment, Adam, just a second to speak maybe a little bit as well. But being creative enough to try to use an agency that wasn't necessarily part of this, but it was part of the network. And to be creative enough to actually allow Sherry the opportunity to be able to grab resources and work together to create a rubric, which is incredibly powerful. We presented it yesterday to the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce. And once again, we got a crowd that said, we've got to do this. The other issue is the amount of industry that sits at this table. And this is an important table. But Duncan Wise challenged us at the Talent Summit and said, essentially saying, it's time to step up. Business and industry, you've got to support and you have to advocate. But they also have to see us provide that ability to advocate. So as I look at this, I look at the model of what we're doing, and I am challenged today because of all of the amazing work. Again, Craig mentioning that as well. All the amazing work that Sherry and her team and so forth have done, all the work that Jenny Newby has done. I see the success in those. You just triggered, doggone it. I see the kids and the amount in 8 weeks. I visited them early in the program, and then I visited late in the program. And I saw the same kid be literally transformed in front of my eyes. That is powerful stuff. And that's powerful stuff for our customers, citizens of the state of Oregon. That is who we are all working for. The positivity of these efforts goes by the wayside. In Sherry's case, as an example, she and we're working hard and diligent. I'm going to try to figure out a way that Sherry's going to stay away one way or another. But it's now a process of just finding that fund to be able to do it. But in order to be able to do this, we have to have sustainability. And so in the process of our future in WTDB, as we are thinking about those priorities and those strategies, I really would like to challenge us as an organization to also start considering more sustainability. If it's a process of testing out a thought or a concept, and so I'll use again OES as an example. We didn't know when we started the project if it was really going to work or not. Pretty sure we had an idea. Jenny didn't necessarily know. But through the process of working that through, we had to trial it and we had to test it. And we had to test it in the educational community and we had to test it in the industrial community. And as we learned, then it became clear that this is a working model. It's something we can leverage, again, for the people that it makes the most difference, our customers. But we didn't have the long term. And now we don't necessarily think we could even have the long term. As I looked at this, I just came through the presentation here. It's a little bit like Nike, I hear, trying to decide what clothes we're going to be wearing in the spring or summer of 2026 or something like that. Their planning cycle. Missed it. Are we out of the question with this next legislative session or not? I don't know. I don't know what rock will be able to return. So I think the piece and the challenge, I think, for all of us, is to think hard, long and hard about those developments that we've put forward, those strategies that we've put forward, and then to really say systematically, how are we going to do that with our infrastructure in our community, but not necessarily just as the WTDB, but quite frankly, with a better alignment with the regions. Tony and I talked about, and Jim, you and I talked about the fact that for whatever reason, you get close to the ground and you get close to the community, the passion goes up and the people, I can make this happen. But we have to have a different relationship, I think, with the WTDB and with those, and I think there's got to be an increased partnership. So I challenge us to try to figure out a way to have that conversation. Before I go, because Adam, you've been frustrated also of not being able to necessarily find a way to keep this going. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I appreciate just kind of being given some time to talk and to listen to Jim and Tony and Sherry. They've all done outstanding work, and I kind of want to be all three of you when I grow up someday. It's pretty awesome. And so I'll just if I can do anything, it's maybe just give voice and context to K-12 and to hear all of these programs in the amazing ways that we're serving youth really across the state, and to be in a situation where these programs might disappear is kind of heart-wrenching. And really, to kind of go with the the call to action and the sense of urgency. We live in a K-12 landscape that is 47th out of 50 in the nation in terms of funding for career and tech ed programs. We don't have maintenance funding at the K-12 to keep these initiatives going. And so my call to action is really to you all, and it's kind of unfair, but we have like nowhere else to turn to really find the faucet to continue to sustain and provide maintenance fundings for these programs that obviously work. It is incredible. I'm supportive. Whatever y'all need from me, it just breaks my heart to hear that some of these programs might not hear.
Advocate and assistance for us in this journey, so I think, so that's kind of the presentation. I would welcome any form of additional conversation in regard to this. I think Craig teed it up well. I applaud the local efforts that Tony's put together and the Jim has put together to actually say, we won't quit. And they've been able to be highly, highly creative in their approach and so forth. I thank you for embedding the essential employability skills in your work. And as much as I can, as much as any WTDB member can, I want your voices to reach out to as many people and as many organizations as you possibly can, because I will either get there, or Sherry will get there, or we're going to get somebody there that can actually keep saying this is important and we need to march it forward. And I'm proud to say the WTB is the one that's pushing this forward.
I wonder, I was just thinking about when Jim was presenting earlier that, just how much more impactful it is when somebody's in front of you. And then you talked about, the closer you get to the ground, et cetera. And, we've done a lot of advocacy work in terms of writing letters, et cetera. And I just think, I think about all the email I get all day, lots of great ideas. It's just like, it's I'll get to it. And I just wonder if we should have a group that comes together that kind of figures out almost like a marketing plan for us, and where we go out, and then we tap all of us, to go in person to things, or we come up with an idea where we bring in representatives, et cetera, for a day, a demonstration day or a demonstration half day. You talked a little bit about doing something like that. Where we can say, this is stuff that's a priority. And what I love about the work, Charlie, that you and Sherry are leading is it's kind of a twofer with the work that these guys are doing.
Absolutely.
And there's other things that we can also advocate for that's going on that the WTDB has, in terms of in front of healthcare or different areas. But I just think maybe there's something a small group should work on that's like our plan. And I do think the window is getting pretty short, but I don't think it's completely closed where you can get in front of somebody, and say hey, when you're sitting there and casting a vote on something, even if it's something generically large, it's think about voting that way because of this work that's going on. And then the work really comes after that to then really get after, carve that money out for this initiative.
Yeah, and I think as well, and I want to play on that because I've participated in Oregon business now for too many years. I don't want to give all of my age up, but it's been a long time. And I've gotten to know a lot of the infrastructure and the power plays within the state of Oregon. As an example, when OBC writes a white paper, people pay attention. I would love for the WTDB to have that kind of a credential. And I think we need that industry connection, and I think we need to be known better. So back to your marketing point, the marketing point is not necessarily about a program, but it's also to let them know where we sit within this system and what we're able to accomplish or what we're not able to. But I think it's important, and we are running into the fact that people don't know the WTDB. They don't know essential employability skills, and it's really tough to get their attention. So those are some of the conflicts and so forth. So absolutely, Jim takes a business in Salem through that particular program. They're going to have donations. They're going to have participation. They're gonna have these other things. And because the local level, you can touch it. Ours is a little bit more obtuse.
I'm tying this back to some of the discussions from, I don't remember how long ago, with the strategic planning for this group. And it seems like some of the same themes coming up about how do we strengthen the voice? How do we strengthen the awareness of the workforce system and the roles of different parts? Because that certainly would get to giving the collective voice of this group a lot more weight if people understood the context. I think it's convoluted enough. I've been in, I don't know how many discussions where someone says, well, like, give me a simple diagram of the workforce system. And I haven't seen one yet. I've seen good diagrams that are accurate, but none of them are simple. So I think people's eyes glaze over and they don't know who they're hearing from. And so I think that there's a connection there. And I'll just agree with what both of you were saying. I think that there are really compelling stories. I think that personal, seeing the impact from both a personal level and having some data to show like the outcomes, the scorecard together are really compelling and very effective. And one of the core things of where is the funding going to come to support this? I think, it's looking everywhere. And we have, it's going to business, it's going to industry, it's maybe going to other worker organizations. I mean, we're here at an employer who's talking about the investments they have in workforce training. And the board does also have legislators as members. And if there's a way to strengthen that connection, because certainly if they were, if we could build that connection, I think it would make attempts to get funding from the state level. If they're here seeing it, that's kind of a natural, stronger connection.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to add, just 2 seconds, Jim. I'd like to add one other thing which I forgot, and that is that as we take on these projects and so forth, really the action portion of our conversation or a development or a strategy is really going to go through an agency of some sort. Again, we can draw them together, but it's going to get executed at a particular agency. Another process that we should do is really identify those agencies when we have these concepts and so forth, so that they are aware of saying, okay, we're going to be looking to you for this, for the long-term sustainability.
Yeah.
Is this something you can, would like to pick up? Because if you can't garner that attention at that point, it's maybe a little unlikely you're going to garner it down the road. Excuse me, Jim.
Yeah. We also.
Yeah, Wendy, please.
Oh,
Wendy, do you want to come in, Jim? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, coming from the hospitality industry and hearing about the employability skills work that's been done and the lack of funding that we're all talking about, I feel that really is a rallying point. And I feel like sometimes industries may feel like they're in competition for dollars, and we might not all understand that actually the whole system is having a challenge with funding. So rallying around and giving us some talking points, we've all been involved in those kind of grassroots things before. I think that's very powerful and something that, we could really all dig our teeth into and feel like we're really contributing. So I wanted to just support that.
Thank you. Jim?
Wendy, I miss you. Do you want to start Team Oregon Cooks?
Yeah.
Let's do it, Jim. I love that.
South Salem High School, as part of Team Oregon Ready, is creating grow your own seed packets for schools to distribute to families in the event of major catastrophe. So,
that's awesome. That's an expansion of some of those agriculture things that they did before. That's fantastic. You're awesome.
You're awesome. Miss you. So the nickname of Team Oregon Build is Team GSD, Team Get Stuff Done. I just texted the core team. You're all invited. Anybody that's hearing this and however we want to broadcast it, because we were able to deliver the units last Friday, we were provided some funding to stand up a professional development in Eastern Oregon on September 27th and 28th. I believe that's a Thursday and Friday. They will put a summit together for any and all partners that want to arrive in Pendleton the morning of the 28th through the early afternoon to see 16 brand new high schools in the Eastern Oregon region who are going to come together to learn the whole Team Oregon Build construct, get all the plans. They'll build 4 prototypes. When those teachers return to their homes, there will be kits there ready for their students to start building to directly support the Eastern Oregon wildfire survivors. And so we can make a touch, see, smell, feel, hear experience happen in 2 weeks for you and for any constituents that you would want to get in that space. So
Could you
Yep.
send us like a little
I will get
write-up about
information to
that?
Todd and Sydney immediately. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
You bet.
Thoughts, feelings? What's next? What do we do? Like, so we're admiring a problem. What do we do to sort of change the, our ability to go forward? So amazing work going on. How can we, as a group, do better to create more action? Something we should like create subcommittee, should we take it to exec committee? What's the right way to kind of get after this?
I was gonna just mention, I think with a group of so many people, it's difficult to kind of corral that together. So my suggestion would be is maybe pick it to a smaller group and so forth. And I think exec committee could be a great idea. It's one of those that I think needs kind of a hard look. And maybe that's where it belongs first, is to really say, this is kind of the focus that we need to add into this process. But
Is there a framework or a process for sort of how the board makes a decision to then either go request support from the governor's office or just sort of put out as individuals that we support this really great program? Is there, I feel like if there was a framework or guidelines, it would be helpful. I think we have guidelines, but I think they're not like, it's sort of like, we were having this discussion at work. We had our senior leadership meeting yesterday and we talked about like having one methodology for how you do something so you can execute faster. So I think we have sort of this large like way in which we operate and it's written down, but I don't think it's fast enough, tight enough, tactical enough. I think it's
Like
kind
my
of
little
step
video.
1, step 2, step 3. Yeah, I think having something a little more specific that's like, we're going to convene twice a year. We're going to pick the things that we're going to advocate for, and then we're going to put the machine in place. It's going to do the following. We're going to meet with these 3 people, typically, or these three types of people. We're going to hold a career day at a, employer. We're going to like just really specific things that we can sort of get after. And then we'll solicit, I think you solicit the group and then all of our partners that we know, because we're not going to have everybody on our board that could represent everything we necessarily want to do. There will be people in our networks that we could say, yeah, I want to have so-and-so to come, or
But-
like
And that's what
the workforce board.
Exactly. I mean, because we are limited in our ability to advocate, and I don't mean to say that critically, but we are an advisory board we have limitations. But I can take an idea back to the Oregon Workforce Partnership.
Yeah.
And if we all agree, then we can advocate until the cows come home.
Yeah.
You could show up as a PGE
Right.
exec and advocate.
Yeah.
AOC could show up, the Association of Oregon Counties could show up and advocate for things. So if we can find kind of these workarounds,
Yeah.
recognizing our limitations as a body, how do we identify those so that we're all saying the same thing?
Yeah.
We got to fund this program. So AOC, what are you going to do? OWP, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's like if we had some real call to action and a structure where we could make some of those decisions, I think it would be
Yeah.
super helpful.
Yeah. And then it's like people keep hearing, it's like, gosh, I keep hearing about this thing.
Exactly.
And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I heard it here. Well, I heard it there.
I
And sort of marshal all of our, now the hard part obviously is, different groups might not agree. Like let's say we came up with 3 things we want to talk about in a year or whatever, or 3 things we want to get after. And so we're just going to be okay with that. We're going to have frank conversations with one another. Like, David, do you feel like you can support and say these things? And he says, yeah, I can on 2 and I can on 3. And we're just going to have to be good about that. I do think, and you all have heard me say this before, I think we have to get better at, I don't know if it's communications or marketing or whatever. I know it's or branding, and I know like probably in this venue, it's like not popular to talk about that kind of stuff because it feels too salesy, but it's true. Like you have to like be able to be crisp. And I do think dashboards, I really appreciate that we saw a dashboard today, especially on the employer side. It's like, man, if I'm going to give you money, you better tell me how you're going to spend it, right? Like what are the outcomes I'm going to get from my investment? So having those kinds of, having that kind of rigor in our putting together of our business plan, we'll call it, I think is really important. So that all the different constituents there, you're sort of speaking their love language, so they can get behind things.
CCL, Career Connected Learning, which holds that whole Team Oregon Build website, is poised and ready to accept any sector partnership that wants to tag on. We have paid nothing for them to put all of that information out there in terms of, because they're there to serve the career connected learning across the spectrum of sector strategies. So imagine the next,
Behavioral health.
right? Boom, there's your platform, there's your location, your
Yeah.
infrastructure is in place to communicate rapidly all the way through.
We have a site
Okay.
partnership focused on behavioral health. We should connect those together. Yeah.
So
That's
healthcare,
great.
IT, transportation, whatever the need is, right?
I wanted to share something too. So first of all, this is the first group that I've said, hey, my job ends in 2 weeks. But I did it because it's a systems problem. And if I don't expose that, that's a problem. Thank God I'm old enough that I'm not going to miss any meals or anything else. If I was young and raising kids, this would be devastating. It's not devastating to me. And I'm so passionate about the process and what we're doing that I've told Charlie, I'm not even looking for something else.
I get her for free.
Yeah, it might for a while. It's completely true. So that's the reason I felt like I could say that today, because it's like, but one of the things when you think about advocating, because I was asked to fill out a form for ODE on what went well and what didn't go well. First of all, it would be really hard pressed for anybody to go into the business of doing anything and think you could do it in 2 years. And so many of our grants are 1 and 2 years. And what that gets us is the first year we're creating something, the second year we're responding to the needs of the people that are going to use it. And then the third year is where you get into your awareness and training. And that's where OES is sort of falling short, is we got it, it's there. Now, if I did walk away in 2 weeks, who would know? How would it keep growing? How would it keep going? Then there's all this money that's invested, that where does it go? And then I have to say this because it's been on my mind for a long time. But ESDs are not able to apply for many of the grants that are out there. And yet I have always thought from my position at the ESD that they were really poised to be able to help a lot of our rural schools in the same way we did with the Willamette Career Academy of 17 kids from 17 different schools coming there, right? So in programs that you would never have a heavy diesel program at 17 of those schools, you can barely do it one when bring 17 people together, right? And make it work because it's so expensive. I look at a lot of the things I see, and I love this, that some of our large schools get these really great things. But our rural schools do not have faculty, staff in the summer to do some of these things in the same way. But at ESD, their workers are working summer long, many of them. I worked all summer long. And I always thought, gosh, I could have been helping them with work-based learning. We could have been doing, we have staff that can help put these things on, but the ESD can't apply for many of those grants. So I would advocate to really look at those things and also look at how can people apply together for things, because you saw what worked was the together. We're I know, kind of a little cliche, but we're better together, right? So how can we do things like that, that bring that more togetherness together, where people say, okay, we're going to do Oregon Employability Skills. We're going to go out and we're going to get Wise Mind doing their part. Tony's going to do a community-based organization. We've got this organization. We need to stop thinking of individual tasks and think about big and great things that we can do to help build into the lives of the people in Oregon.
So, I hate to put you on the spot. Is there like something you can do to help us sort of get organized around this?
Yeah, I'm happy to help. Clay and I have been sort of strategizing behind the scenes. I think next week he and I can come together and take what's been shared today and sort of synthesize it and get it down on paper maybe. I love your idea, Kim, of some sort of a methodology or a tool. When we get things like this that resonate with the lion's share, if not everyone, that sees the work, hears about the work, the why, the how, and to your point, Ian, the data and results behind it, a dashboard that shows the success. It would be really cool to have a tool to run that through. You know, I don't know what, I'm kind of making this up, but I don't know what, maybe it's 10 questions or 10 sort of grading areas. And you've got a, you know, everybody looks at it, it's on the board and, or on the exec team, I'm not sure. And it says, you know, is this a, you know, is this a promising or best practice? Rate it on a score of 1 to 10. 4 being 1, 10 being excellent, and have 9 other questions in there in terms of return on investment. Is it worth moving forward? And then, you know, have a grading scale at the bottom of it that says, hey, if it's 50 or below, we're not paying attention to it. If it doesn't meet with our 5 joint priorities and the strategic plan, we're not going to go off on a other thing. We're going to stay focused, true to our priorities and all this good work that we've done. Score them, and if they do hit the, whatever the threshold is, 90%, 80%, whatever we decide, and it's okay, we're going to move forward with some of these things that,
And then
not all of these things that you said. So Clay and I can work on something, and we can start doing that next week and come up with something for you all to react to. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I still think, yes, it would be. And I think there's still also some work to do to talk about like how, so we have the framework. So now what, like, it would be good to have something tighter like that. And then, okay, so now we've got the thing, we've ran it through the framework. Now what do we do? And I think maybe a small group, if you could help convene, I think it's probably.
So we do exec?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's probably the easiest. We can start there. And if it's like too hard to get the exec, maybe it's even smaller. But I think here's kind of our basic model for how we're gonna do stuff. If we want to push it forward. And I think we should still do things where we write, you know, formal letter to the governor once a year. I think all that stuff is good. But I think there's something that we need to do in between that's like you know, we want to get after this thing, 3 things. And, you know, what's our plan for how we're going to do that and how, you know, sort of are we doing that twice a year, et cetera, and something that's really hands-on and impactful. And then we'll measure it and see how we do, like how much success do we have? You know, it will take us time over, you know, a period of time to figure out how successful we are. But I would hope that at least we start doing things where we say we're going to engage 3 legislators, we're going to go and speak to the legislative body, we're going to do this, this, and this. And we do it on some sort of like, this is the machine in place. You know, maybe we'll see some different results.
Yeah, that's great.
And then I do think this piece about Duncan is interesting. Like maybe there's something there with him. I don't know that we should talk about in that small group.
Well, and also I was thinking, David, you'd be super helpful in terms of, I think it was Charlie who said, how can we better engage with the agency heads like yourself to sort of get your take on it? And you said, is this something you could help us with, David, or is that something we should stay away from? So that's sort of part of the framework. And then what do we do now?
Yeah.
Would be super helpful.
Well, and I think Kim too, with
Oh, and Kim too,
yeah,
yes.
with the local workforce boards, like, because they have their things that they're working on that are priorities, but then how do we sort of roll up or roll down, whatever, and sort of convene all those, because that's 9 different pretty powerful voices. Right.
Well, and I think, you know, Craig and I have talked about this, the importance of better communication and sort of working between the state workforce board and the local workforce board. We talk about that a lot. We talk about how we work and should work better together, but
Well,
you know, Craig can probably talk to that with 30 years of experience with the local workforce board and the state workforce board is way better than I can.
Well, Charlie touched on it already.
Yeah, I mean, I
The
think
fact
it's
is,
a big.
who knows what WTDB is?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly. Some people in this room.
Yeah, another practical example, and I don't know the answer to this, is how many of the local boards have been trained by Sherry in what OES is to be able to push out to all the CBOs and so forth that are serving those various communities? Because that's how you network.
Right.
You've got to go through that system.
Yeah, it's funny. I just was thinking this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but you know, we are private, nonprofit, 501c3 organizations. We can apply for any kind of money.
Yep.
And what we do is convene and then contract out to do what I like to call the real work. So we could do that. I mean, an individual board could do it. The Oregon Workforce Partnership entity could do that. There's no reason why we can't go out and find money and then subcontract it out with WESD or somebody else so that we can keep this work alive.
Right.
There's no limitations. I think we just have to think about it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
And I'm happy to be part of those discussions. And I think part of it, besides that rubric that you were talking about to kind of escalate the things that really are the focus items, is having, and I don't know what it would look like, but there are these different networks, like you were talking about, there are certain things that you can do to get the word out or to apply for funds or to implement. There are certain things that the employment department can do. You have connections with counties. I mean, if we had some way of just cataloging, like, oh, this is something that we really need to engage the state legislature. Okay, which of these tools is best?
Which journey?
Right.
Yeah.
One tool, and I'll be honest, I think it's not that effective. Like, we have an advisory council for the employment department. They have on rare occasions submitted a letter. So I mean, this board is supposed to do an annual report. I don't think the statute says it can't do an ad hoc letter about a particular thing separate from that. I think without the other work to engage more, the extra letter will not be all that effective. But that could be, an example of one of the tools in the toolbox. That we look and we say, is this a good one?
Yeah.
Statement I love to do, and I hear it a lot, as we have our conversations, is we need to do that. And then I generally did this through my career, and I stopped the conversation. I said, who's the we?
And what's plan B? What's the plan?
And I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Who's the we and we?
Yeah, that's right. Wendy, is your hand left up from before, or do you have a new comment?
No, I'm sorry. I don't know how to put it down. I'll do that.
Change your name. I was thinking it's getting really tired.
Yeah. All right.
So, we'll be prepared for staff to bring back, maybe we'll float this with some of you, it's draft before we come back on October 16th, which is our next WTDB exec committee meeting from 1 to 3.
And thank you for the forum.
Yes, thank
October
you. I appreciate you speaking
16th
up.
from 1 to 3 p.m.
Is there?
Let Sydney know if you'd like to be invited, and I'll get you on there.
I'd like to be
Thank you,
invited.
Sydney.
Make sure you're there.
Sydney, is there anything else that's follow-up? So thank you for that
Yeah.
recap, Todd. Anything else from the meeting that we need to follow up on? We have, Jim's gonna send us out an invitation and some explanation. There's some people in my organization I want to send that
Great.
to, so that'll be super helpful.
Yep, I have that on there, the September 27th and 28th from Team Oregon Build. And then also the minutes need to be approved for June at the next meeting or at the executive committee meeting, whatever we decide. And then the conversation we were just having, I kind of wrapped that up into an action item, but.
And then you're going to send out all the slides from the packet, and then what's the other thing? Oh,
Garage
garage,
sale.
So I have these packets here today. If someone doesn't already have one, this was our first attempt at awareness. We're getting better at it. But there's a little bit about OES in here. If you were to share it with someone and you wanted a little bit more language around it. There's also an action item in here, which is for those letters of support. And just asking people to tell us, share with us why this is important to them and so forth. And then we hired Vanetta here in town to do, in Salem, to do a PR thing for us. They're having to do it in 2 weeks. God bless them. They have the staff to do it. And so next week there'll be a survey coming out. And if I can count on you guys to just think, when you think of the weeds, who could you send it to get that survey information? That survey information largely is for the report in December. We're trying to garner more information. There are 4 questions for industry. There are 4 in CBOs, et cetera, and 4 questions for education, but they were selected to help us understand who's out there, what their interest is and what their needs are. So I'll get that to Sydney. And if you guys have any, we don't care if people get it 3 ways, but we are looking to get people to fill out that survey to really help us understand what
a burn campaign, short duration, very tight, and it's to essentially create a greater list that we can start tapping to use those.
How many of those are you able to produce?
I have about 50,
Okay, good.
not 500 of them.
I mean, I know they just came out, but we could have been handing those out when employers came to the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sending them out with those, so we'll get some for the next round. We're starting another cohort October 7th.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right.
Friday, or I'll take some with me.
Anything else for the good of the order? All right, meeting is adjourned. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Drive safely and take good care.
Thanks, everybody.
7 minutes early.
I know, I was gonna say, Anne wants to be on record.
Ann.